This episode is sponsored by ORGAIN. Looking for an easy way to improve your health and eating habits? Check out ORGAIN's 30-gram shakes, full of protein-packed real nutrition designed to satisfy your cravings. They're a great source of complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids to give you energy while maintaining hunger and helping you maintain a healthy lifestyle. Plus, ORGAIN shakes are made with no artificial ingredients or sweeteners and only 1 gram of sugar. ORGAIN 30-gram protein shakes are available at Costco, or you can support the show by heading to orgain.com/command and using code COMMAND for 20% off your order.
Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
And today we are talking about all the cards that go in your library from Duskmourn, House of Horrors. We're going to break down, are they good? Are they bad? Should we play them? In what decks? We've got a lot of cards to talk about today, but before we get into any of those, if you want to pick up any of these singles or sealed product, go over to cardkingdom.com/command and pick up all of the Duskmourn cards you want and need for your decks. We'll let you know in this episode which ones those are. Card Kingdom is a great place to shop. They've got a huge amount of singles all in one place. If you're looking for any of the fancy treatments from Duskmourn, there's a few. It's nice to be able to shop in one place, get exactly the cards that you're looking for, and not chase dozens of envelopes through the mail. Plus, they've got a great team over there. In case something happens, you can always reach out to their awesome customer service and make sure that you are taken care of and getting exactly the cards that you want. Plus, when you're shopping for Magic cards, which we know you're going to do, you can support the show without spending any extra money. Again, go to cardkingdom.com/command.
And of course, once you get those cards, you want them to be protected. You want them to look awesome on your battlefield. Ultra Pro is the game accessories company that we trust our own collections to here at the Command Zone. If you go to ultrapro.com/command, you can find all kinds of cool products, including a bunch of stuff with Duskmourn artwork on it. So if you want playmats, sleeves, deck boxes adorned with your scariest new commander.
Adorned with Duskmourn.
Adorned with Duskmourn. New log line for Ultra Pro. That one's free.
Yeah, you're going to have that.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the Mana 8 product, which we all really like around the office. They sent us some of it, and every time we see it, we're like, man, it looks really stylish and classy. So if you just got a new blue deck and you want blue sleeves, deck box, and playmat, and you want to match blue binder with blue pages inside, there's all kinds of cool stuff. Ultra Pro has you covered. ultrapro.com/command, once again, is the way to find that stuff.
And the final way to support us is directly over on patreon.com/command zone. All of our patrons keep the lights on over here. You guys are really supporting us making all of the content that we do here at the Command Zone. Plus, there's some sweet perks, too. You get to access to extra turns and game nights a day early without ads. Cool. Plus, you get access to exclusive content like Turn Talk, which is a conversation we have after every single episode of Extra Turns about how the game went, what we drew, what was in our hand, what do we wish could have happened.
What we wish didn't happen.
One more turn without that in play, and I was going to be good. Turn Talk is a ton of fun, and you can only get access to that by being a patron. Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode. We shout out one podcast every single patron episode, and this one is dedicated to Andrew Roach. Andrew,
you rock.
You do.
Related to Dana, maybe?
Maybe.
No. Okay, let's get into it here. The main topic, which is the best cards from Duskmourn for your 99. The best one to put in your room, if you will.
Each deck is a room, and you can put rooms in your room.
There you go.
So they keep printing more and more powerful cards, flexible cards, modal cards. There's tons of powerful cards that could go into any of your decks. We're not going to be able to talk about all of them. As always, we're not going to cover the ones that are for very specific strategies. There's a few very supported strategies in this. There's a lot of new Enchantress stuff. If it's a blue Enchantress, you should play it. It's good. And there's like face down creatures, matter stuff, and there's a lot of very narrow effects. We're not going to cover those. We're going to try and talk about the cards that you're most likely to see or most likely want to play in most of your decks.
Yeah, or the ones that are kind of interesting and take a little bit of thinking to maybe crack or figure out the best usage of. But it's not that interesting probably for you or for us to be like, do you have 25 or more enchantments in your deck? Does it have blue in it? Yeah, run that.
You should play that.
Yeah. Do you have 25 or more zombies in your deck? It's the same sort of deal, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You guys are smart. We bet you can figure them out.
But there's some that are tough to figure out. And
there are.
And made me think about it for a while and start looking up cards in Scryfall. And those are ones we should talk about that.
For sure. And we're going to start talking about some umbrella topics in this set. There's a lot of really interesting new mechanics before we get into specific cards. So the first thing I want to talk about is Delirium.
Okay.
Delirium is a theme in Duskmourn.
It's a returning mechanic.
Mm-hmm. It basically means a card has additional utility if you have 4 different card types in your graveyard.
Yeah, so the different card types, can I list them all?
Do you know how many there are?
7?
More than
8?
that.
9?
Hey!
There's 9 now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's lands, creatures, instants, sorceries, artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, battles, kindred, and...
That's 9.
Oh, that is 9. I was like, I still have one finger down. I must need one more. Oh, I got him.
That's all 9. All of those are included in that count. It's basically everything that a Tarmogoyf sees.
Yeah. So you just need 4 or more. So the easiest ones are going to usually be land, creature, instant, sorcery. But because a lot of those can put themselves there.
In the bin, right?
Yeah. But, it is a thing where it is a little bit harder to hit in decks that aren't milling themselves than you think it's going to be. In self-mill decks, it's generally pretty easy to hit, but you don't want to just count on getting Delirium without having some synergy that's going to help you get there, I think.
I agree. I think a lot of people are looking at Delirium cards very casually and be like, assuming I have Delirium, this card is amazing.
Yeah.
And you're like, assuming you have Delirium is like, that's a big step. You have to have a lot of self-milling, and you do have to have a pretty good balance of types. It doesn't have to be all 9 types, but a pretty good balance of types. Like my Sidisi deck is a self-mill deck, but it runs 60 creatures.
Yeah.
Like the odds of me hitting Delirium are not as high as in other self-mill decks that are less focused on one creature, on one card type.
That's a really good point, because in that deck, you can get land and creature really easy.
Oh, yeah.
And then after that,
you're like, I hope I milled an artifact creature.
Yeah, and I think the number of artifact creatures you have really helps that count. The numbers of instants and sorceries you have really helps that count. But in general, I would say if you're self-milling, your ability to hit Delirium is a lot higher, just because you will have some one-off enchantments and maybe not planeswalkers and stuff in there. But if you don't have a single card in your deck that's going to literally let you be able to like take something and put it in the bin from your library, you should think of the Delirium cards a lot more narrowly.
Right. And we're going to talk about some specific ones in the set. There's a few cards that I want to talk about first that are just completely dead if you don't have Delirium in most decks. So I think the big one everybody's thinking of is Demonic Council. 1 and a black for a sorcery that says search your library for a demon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Delirium. If there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, instead search your library for any card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this is a demonic tutor.
Yep.
If you have Delirium.
Yep. It's in black, which is a big point in its favor. It probably won't be that hard to have a little bit of self-mill in there, but I wouldn't count it the same way I'd count a demonic tutor, obviously.
Doesn't work all the time.
Yeah.
And it only works in the late game. It only works once you have an engine online.
That's a really good point. Demonic tutor is really good. One of the reasons it's good is because if I need mana, I go get my Soul Ring on turn 2. If I need card draw, I go get my Rhystic Study on turn 2. This is going to be very unlikely to be able to do that.
Right.
It's still good.
Yeah, it's like a redundant, probably finisher tutor piece.
Yeah, I can go find my Crater Hoof more likely than I'm going to go find like my setup piece.
Right. So that's Demonic Council. If you can get Delirium, it's very good. If you can't get Delirium or you don't have a deck full of demons, don't play it. Fear of Missing Out is the next one. This is a 2-mana 2/3 Nightmare. It's an enchantment creature in red. It says when it enters, discard a card, then draw a card. That helps. It means that you can start getting Delirium online.
Yep.
But then it says whenever Fear of Missing Out attacks for the first time each turn, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, untap target creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So there's some very powerful words in there. But this is a 2-mana 2/3 without evasion. It only untaps 1 creature, and it doesn't do anything but loot unless you have Delirium.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a 2-mana 2/3 that loots when it comes in, so the floor is not that low. But still at the same time. And it actually takes you one step closer to hitting Delirium. But I still think you would want before you can run this card, you want other things in your deck that are helping you hit Delirium.
Right.
You may not need 10 cards in your deck that do that, but you need some amount that's like, this is a thing I already am doing. I'm already playing Thrill of Possibilities or some other things that are going to allow me to put things in there. Because if this is the only card that lets you specifically put things in the graveyard, then it's just not going to be able to do its thing that often.
Yeah, I like this in like a reanimator list where you can use that discard and draw a card. That's perfect. And then you have one big thing that you can untap and have a second combat with. That's great.
And that part's kind of gravy because just putting something in your bin was already more valuable to you than the average deck. I really like thinking about it in those terms. Another thing I would think about is like, hey, can I up my fetch land count, even if it's Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanses, if I'm going to put a card like this in the deck? Just give me another better chance to get a land in there, get one step closer to Delirium.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to discard a card for the most part, if it can be an artifact or one of the harder cards to get in there, you're going to want to do that.
For sure.
Yeah.
The next one that is pretty dead without Delirium, but is very powerful, is the Roller Crusher Ride. X, 2 and a red for a legendary enchantment. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player while there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, it deals double that damage instead. And then when it enters, you deal X damage to each of up to X target creatures. So this is a very expensive way to kill creatures if you don't have Delirium. But if you do have Delirium, it gets much, much better.
Yeah. And the thing I'd say about this card is that because X is going to want to be a certain amount, it's a card you're naturally not going to want to play till later in the game anyway. So that makes it a lot better because you're more likely to have Delirium the later in the game it is.
Yeah.
So that's another great thing to think about with Delirium. Is this card a card where I'm going to want to play it early, where it's harder to have Delirium, or it's naturally a card that I'm going to want to play late anyway, and then more likely I will just be able to have that Delirium ready.
Right. So this is a tricky one to find a spot for, but there are going to be certain decks that have a lot of wheels or like have a lot of pingers that you need to be filling up your graveyard. You need to be dealing non-combat damage and, you know, make enough mana for this to be a considerable removal spell or multiple removal spells.
Yeah, but you can think of scenarios where it's very powerful and
Absolutely.
you don't even you pay X is equal to 0 and it's still really good for you based on your setup. So yeah, it's not that they're bad. I just think they require like an additional layer of thought, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There are 2 cards I want to talk about before we get off of Delirium that are better the more you can support it, but are probably not as dead if you can't reliably get Delirium. This first one is Drag to the Roots, 2 black-green for an instant. It has Delirium. It costs 2 less to cast if you have Delirium, and destroy target non-land permanent. Obviously, if you have Delirium, this card is extremely powerful.
Yeah. But in a pinch, it's like something I'd ward to, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like,
I'll do it if I'm going to die, right? So it's not, Whereas other Delirium cards are like, just doesn't do this if you don't have it. This one is like,
it's going to cost you a little bit more.
yeah, you have an alternate way to get around the Delirium, right? And would you pay 2 mana to hit Delirium on it?
Yeah. I mean, it's. I think this card is very powerful, and if you're reliably filling up your graveyard, if you're doing like Jund looty stuff, then Drag to the Roots is going to be really great and really flexible, predictable for green-black removal.
Yep.
The final one is sweet, and you're going to love this card. It's Peer Past the Veil, 2 red-green for an instant. Discard your hand. Then draw X cards where X is the number of card types among cards in your graveyard.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
It's really sweet.
So if you even draw 4, you're really happy.
At instant speed, you discard 2, draw 4.
It's great. Even discard, 4, draw 4 can be good if they're mostly lands or whatever, but your graveyard already had stuff in it.
Right. Your graveyard had stuff in it, and the stuff you discard counts for your Delirium, as does this instant, I believe.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the spell has left the stack by the time it's resolving.
So, and 4 is kind of, I would consider like the floor. If you get 3, you're kind of unhappy, but you can get 5, 6, 7. If you get all 9, please tweet at me with a picture.
Pretty cool. I'm going to be putting this in my Disa deck that is already trying to hit as many creature types or card types as possible. It's going to be a really sweet card draw spell in that deck. Yeah.
I mean, self-wheels are just good. And because of Delirium and other things, caring about card types and graveyards, it's going to be even better. The next mechanic, I will say we played this set in Limited a little bit now, and this mechanic was stronger than than it reads, I think.
I agree.
Quite a bit better than I thought, and I know Limited and Commander are different, but it definitely changed my evaluation of it a little bit. So it's Manifest Dread, which is kind of a twist on the old mechanic Manifest. So what you do is you look at the top 2 cards of your library, and then you manifest one of them, which means you put it face down on the battlefield as a 2/2 creature, and then you put the other one that you didn't choose into your graveyard. And then just like Manifest, if it's a creature, the card that you put on the battlefield, you can pay its mana cost, and then as a special action, flip it up to its regular side. And as a special action just means that if you pay that cost and flip it up, and it's a 5/5 on the other side, they can't go like, wait, before it flips up, I lightning bolt it. There's no chance to respond in there. It's up. There's no moment where before it flips up, if you pay that mana at any time, it flips up before anything else can happen.
For sure.
The fact that you get to pick between 2 cards And the fact that the other one goes in the graveyard, both of those pieces are like really, really good extra pieces. It's like you sort of like stapled a surveil onto it.
Yeah.
And you're just way more likely to actually hit a creature.
It's like explore, but instead of drawing a land, you make a creature?
Yeah. It's really good. Every time I did it, I was like, wow, that feels great. I got a creature way more often. And your opponent is like, that could be even if you put a creature in the graveyard, they're like, what the heck is the other thing?
Right.
It's just, it just plays really good. So it raised my estimation of the cards that say Manifest Dread. There's that one that Manifest Dread on each upkeep or whatever. And also it made the cards that say, hey, your opponent Manifest Dread, worse in my book than I originally thought.
Yeah, I want to talk about
reality shift. Yeah,
I picked one card to talk about for Manifest Dread because it's really good in certain strategies, but like overall, you're not going to play a ton of Manifest Dread in your decks. But I did want to talk about Unwanted Remake, which is a single white for an instant that says destroy target creature. Its controller manifests Dread.
So it is in the mold of Swords and Path because it's like, hey, get rid of a creature that's destroyed, not exile, and then your opponent gets, quote unquote, a marginal sort of rebate advantage, right? Life in Swords to Plowshares, they get a land with Path to Exile, and this one is Manifest Dread. And I think when I originally read this, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I thought this was probably roughly equivalent to Path to Exile.
Interesting. Yeah.
Close.
It's close. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a 2/2.
A land is better to give them than the Manifest Dread, but
sometimes
the exile and the destroy is sort of
I was thinking of Reality Shift as
Sure.
like, if it Reality Shift's 1 mana, it's like, well, it's pretty close
good.
to Path, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But then playing with it, I'm like, I think Manifest Dread is just better enough than regular Manifest that I actually think this is a little worse than Path. Still good.
Yeah.
But like, they're twice as likely to get a creature. And when there's 2 creatures, they just get the better one. And they put something in the graveyard, which oftentimes is way better for them than, it does add up to, it sort of lowered my estimation of this card. Like I said, I still think it's good, but
it's quite good.
What was your progression of thinking about this card? I'm curious to hear if you had something similar.
I had it worse than Swords to Plowshares, just pretty much.
For sure, 100%.
Just off the bat, because the exile is just so much better than destroy these days.
And even give 10 life is marginal in Commander. You don't worry about it.
Yeah. And it like giving somebody a land is a huge cost, but at the cost of one creature being gone, it's pretty good. But this is so efficient. It made me look at it twice. And the thing is, I think Manifest Dread is a little bit better than I thought. I agree. It's a lot of card selection. It gives you a creature that can attack next turn if they flip it up. It gives them like tricks and moves, which I just don't want to do, especially if I'm spending a card to like go down a card against my other 2 opponents. Like trading 1 for 1 is already bad. Trading 1 for like half a 1 feels worse.
Yeah.
So I think this card is, I would play like Parting Gust over this, which is the white one from Bloomburrow that has more utility for you and gets the creature gone. A little bit less efficient, but a little bit more flexible and just powerful overall.
Yeah. I think the Destroy versus the Exile is a really big deal too.
Yeah.
But when I did first read it, I was like, this is in the mix. And then as I played with Manifest Dread, I was like, no, it's not.
Yeah. You would need a lot of white creature removal spells, I think, to get to this in Commander.
Okay. The next mechanic, it reads pretty simple, but then it kind of gets complicated, which is weird. It's kind of one of the marquee mechanics of the set. It's rooms.
Yes.
So this is a new card type, kind of. It's a new subtype?
It's an enchantment subtype.
Yeah.
It's like sagas.
There you go. So they are all enchantments, but the way that they work is they have 2 cards on them. They're split down the middle, similar to like fuse cards. And then you can cast either side. So when you cast it, you choose the left or the right side, and that's the side that you are unlocking as it comes into play. The other side will be locked, and then at any point in the game, at sorcery speed only though, you can unlock the other side and get that effect. And then you have both effects kind of online. Some of them are continuous and some of them are like one time. But it is just intrinsically, these are all 2 cards on 1 card. So they're all kind of 2-for-1s.
Right. It's very interesting. You have to read every room as do this thing, draw a card.
Yeah.
And it's what card you're drawing. It's sort of partner with. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it's sort of, because it could be destroyed, but I guess you could be discarded as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's so there is additional upside on all of these things. As a result, most room effects are a little overcosted in some way or another because it comes with another card.
Yeah, this is absolutely how they've always sort of balanced this type of effect.
Yeah.
Like fuse cards and things like that, which is like 2 things that are slightly overcosted, but because you get access to both of them, you're paying a little extra for that flexibility and for that additional value.
Right. So a couple of rules things, because
this
these
gets
are
weirder than you think.
really weird. It sounds really simple. It's like Animate Dead. It sounds so simple. You're like, I get what it does. And then there's so many questions that come up. So when you cast one side of the room,
Right.
it unlocks when it hits the battlefield.
Yes.
But if the room hits the battlefield without having been cast, so if it was copied or if it was blinked, both doors are locked.
Yep.
Because there's no cast thing that will unlock either side.
Yep.
You can unlock either room from there, but if you blink a room, doors are locked.
Yep. If it gets copied while it's on the stack, while it's cast. So let's say Rachel says, I'm going to cast this room and I'm going to unlock the left side door. While it's on the stack, let's say I have some sort of spell that will copy it, then I will unlock the room that she has chosen to unlock. I copy what she was unlocking. I can't choose the other side of the room, I guess, to unlock. And it also doesn't come in with neither side unlocked or both locked. So when it's on the stack, it kind of behaves differently than when it's in play, because if I copy it while it's already in play, both doors are locked. And the interesting thing starts to happen when you say, okay, well, what if I turn a permanent into a room card? So what's the mirror that copies things?
A Mirage Mirror.
Yeah. So let's say I Mirage Mirror Rachel's room while she's got both sides unlocked. What's my Mirage Mirror?
It doesn't have either doors unlocked.
Right.
Because the unlockedness is a quality of the card.
Yes. You can think of it almost like there were hidden counters or maybe emblems on the card that say which doors are locked and which are not unlocked. And those are not a copyable effect. So if I clone it, I turn it into a copy of it or anything like that, it doesn't see the rooms that were unlocked on the other card. It just says neither of these have been unlocked yet. So they're both locked. The only time that's not true really is when you copy it on the stack.
Right. Something else that's weird is unlocking. We talked about unlocking a door that's already on the battlefield.
Yep.
If you unlock the other door, that's a special action.
Oh.
So just like turning a manifested creature face up, they can't destroy the room in response to them unlocking the other door.
Right. You can only do it at sorcery speed, but once you pay that cost, it's not like a trigger that goes on the stat that this room's about to unlock. It says, you unlocked it. It's open.
It's open.
Yeah.
So they get that static ability right now, and you can respond to the next thing on the stack.
The next time you have priority, yeah.
Yeah. But it's going to get unlocked. The other weird thing...
Because there's more.
Is while this is from the, I believe it's from the set notes for the set. It says, while on the battlefield, a room card has the characteristics of its unlocked doors. For example, if only Mirror Room is unlocked, that's a 3-mana door, the permanent's mana value is 3. The permanent on the battlefield is 3. If both doors are unlocked, the permanent's mana value is the total number of the doors that's unlocked. So in this case, it would be 10 because it's a 7 mana is the other door. So its mana value changes depending on what doors are open.
Yeah, I can't remember this ever being the case for another card before. I could be wrong.
Prototype is the only other example.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that depends on... Yeah, but this one changes as you do it, right? So it's like it can be a 3-mana value thing that later in the game is a 10-mana value thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that might have some ramifications. I don't know that I've come up with any thinking about it, but it is interesting.
Devotion is the biggest thing I've thought of. If you unlock the other room, it now has more devotion than it had before.
Yeah. So this Mirror Room / Fractured Realm, if you play the left side, it's got 1 devotion to blue, but then as soon as you unlock the second side, you have 3 devotion to blue from it. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is very strange. It's just like split cards. The mana value when it's everywhere else is the total.
Yep.
So if it's in the graveyard, if it's in your library, it's a 10 mana permanent. So if you flip it off of a Yuriko, 10.
Got it. Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, seems good, right?
Good in some cases, bad in others, I suppose.
So the way that they've designed a lot of these rooms, we haven't talked about any of them specifically. This concludes all the weird room rules that I know about. We'll find out more.
There might be more. We can't guarantee there won't be more, not in this episode.
They've designed one room that is an approximation of an effect that we play in Commander. And then the other room is like a more narrow, sort of more overcosted effect that we might want.
Right.
Is sort of how a lot of these have been designed. So we've alluded to Mirror Room, Fractured Realm. Mirror Room is the first door of this room. It's 2 and a blue. It says, when you unlock this door, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other creature types. Okay?
Clone.
3 mana clone, only clone your own stuff, and it makes a token. Other side is Fractured Realm. It's 5 blue. It says, if a triggered ability of a permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time.
Wow.
7 mana's a lot.
Yeah.
But,
It's
wow, what a
but
line
it's
of
gravy.
text. Yeah.
That's the thing is like, it's Glasspool Mimic on one side, which is, a fine card, right?
Yeah.
And then you're just like, well, if I ever can do the other side, it's going to be sweet, but I don't have to because what did I lose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just play a pretty regular enchantment that made a token copy of a thing. Like, that's a very playable, fine card in decks that want that effect with this really powerful upside that maybe you'll need someday.
Yeah. It's I think this fits in the same sort of general strategic philosophy of MDFCs and things like that, where you're like, yeah, I get upside that I don't have to realize in every game for it to still be upside.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a couple of rooms that meet these qualifications. We're going to talk about them sort of generally, but let's read through them, I think. So the next one is Walk-in Closet. The first door is 2 and a green. It says you may play lands from your graveyard. Great.
So just Crucible.
And the other side is Forgotten Cellar, 3 green. When you unlock this door, you may cast spells from your graveyard this turn. And if a card would be put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, exile it instead.
So it's
Yawgmoth's
Will. Yeah.
And you can play the lands too. So this is a very powerful effect. It only lasts for 1 turn, and it is 5 mana, which is quite overcosted.
Yeah, does set it back because you spend the 5 mana, then you have to have mana left over to actually cast spells out of your graveyard. But still, the left side helps you get more mana into play, so it's kind of like...
And the floor is a Crucible?
Yeah.
Like, that's a very powerful effect. We play Raminap Excavators. I play the 5 mana one.
Heck yeah.
Artifact creature.
And that's not even overcosted on the left side. That just is the cost for that effect. So you don't give up anything by just putting this into your deck if it already wanted a Crucible or a Raminap Excavator, and then you just do have access to that other side. Overcosted, but...
Really powerful.
Would you just take upside on a Crucible World? Like, if a Crucible World just said... Yeah, and then,
if
for
you want
6 mana, do you want a Yawgmoth's Will sometimes?
You're like, for 5, but yes.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, even if it was that, you'd just be like, let's say it was 9 mana for a Yawgmoth's Will sometime. Yes, I'm playing Crucible anyway.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I just take that?
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this card's very good. And there's not a lot more to say other than, like, this is an effect we want, and it has more upside, and it's just good.
Yep.
The next one is Funeral Room. 2 and a black. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1, and you gain 1. Great. And the other side is Awakened Hall. 6 black. When you unlock this door, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's Rise of the Dark Realms, kind of, only yours.
And a Zulaport Cutthroat on the other side.
Yep. Seems great. There's not much to say,
Yeah,
right?
like-
Because it's just like...
I want to read them so people know they exist.
Yeah.
But it's also like, you should play this if you want.
You
one
really
of
have
those
to
effects.
want the 3 mana side.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think you put it in the deck for the 3 mana side, and everything else is sort of kicker.
Yeah, because if you're doing the other way around, it's like, well, you might never do the high mana cost one.
Right.
But the low mana cost one, you're saying like, yeah, I'm happy with that in my deck.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even have to be your main strategy, right? You don't have to be like, oh, I'm dumping a bunch of cards in my own graveyard to reanimate. It's just like sometimes some games people wrath twice. And I'll do that.
Yeah, I've got 8 mana and no creatures on the battlefield. I'll pay this.
Yeah.
It seems very good. So play that deck if you want the Funeral Room. There's one more we're going to talk about. This one's a little different. It's the right room that I think you're building around, but it's Prop Room. It's 2 and a white. It says untap each creature you control during each other player's untap step.
I like that.
We play that for 3 mana. And the other side is 3 and a white, and it says creature spells you cast have Convoke.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, that's really cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So both of those are playable.
And they synergize together. The other ones kind of didn't as much synergize together. This is great. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm going to untap all my stuff. And they kind of are mana dorks because of the Convoke.
Yeah, if I play flash creatures, then this is extremely powerful.
But you could also just play in a deck that has a lot of mana dorks, which could tap to cast your creatures anyway and say, like, I'm not going to Dazzling Theater that much, but I really just want the Drum Bellower effect, right? And that's very powerful effect in the right deck, and you just play for that. I mean, do I want redundancy of that effect? Yeah. There's not that much recurable untap all your stuff.
Yeah.
Especially in white, so.
This is the one that I could see building around both sides. If you're a token deck and you're like, I have like Big Angels as my top end, I'm going to use all my tokens as mana, you could build around the Convoke side, and that is a unique effect and very powerful in token decks.
Well, the great thing about that setup is then the second side becomes something you do want since you have the left side open.
Right. Yeah. So I think this card is very good, and there's not much else to say other than that.
Yep. I think a lot of the rooms are going to be good because of that, just the flexibility.
I would also say, like, you don't need too many of any of these effects that we talked about, right? Except for maybe the Zulaport Cutthroat. That one, we'll take all the effects we can get. But, like, too many Raminap Excavators are redundant. Too many Untap Your Creatures is generally redundant. I mean, you can kind of use it, I guess. So maybe replace one of them rather than adding another one into your deck. Okay, the final mechanic we're going to talk about is Impending. This is a suspend-ish mechanic, but this time you cast the creature as an enchantment, and then it slowly becomes a creature.
Yeah, it's close to suspend, but as suspend, it's in exile and not existed in the game until the suspend counters come off.
Right.
Impending is like, hey, it's a sort of a diminished version of itself, and then once the counters come off, it becomes a full creature version of it.
The other big difference between suspend and impending is the counters come off on your end step, which is particularly consequential because they become creatures.
It also means you get around that sort of weird thing with suspend where it comes in and it has haste, which could be an upside and could be a downside, because when it comes on in the end step, it will, I think all of these will trigger, but at the same time, they won't get to attack that turn, and there'll be a full rotation of, like, they might die.
They are already on the battlefield, so they won't trigger. So let me.
Oh, you're right. They don't have summoning sickness.
So they're on the battlefield.
But it's an end step. You can't attack at the end step. Yeah.
So it's their way of giving them summoning sickness.
Got it.
Sort of without.
Because if they did it on the upkeep,
it
then
would be able to attack. Yes.
Gotcha.
So Impending says, if you cast the spell for its impending cost, it enters with a number of time counters, and it isn't a creature until the last is removed. At the beginning of your end step, remove a time counter from it. So this is a cycle of mythics. They're all overlords. We're going to evaluate Overlord of the Haunt Woods, which is the green one. It's 3 green. It says, whenever Overlord of the Haunt Woods enters or attacks, create a tapped colorless land token named Everywhere that is every basic land type. It is a 6/5. Okay, so this has Impending 4.
Yep.
So you pay 1 green, and you get an enchantment of this that gets an Everywhere, a tapped Everywhere token land.
It's kind of a bad rampant growth.
Yeah.
In that, it's bad because it costs 3, but I guess it's good because it gives you a land that taps for everything.
Yeah.
But I'd rather just have a land for 1 less mana, but still.
Yeah. And then on your first end step, you remove a counter. On the next end step, you remove a counter. On the next end step, you remove a counter. On the next end step, you remove a counter. And then I think you can attack with it.
If you're just listening to the audio,
oh God,
I'm shaking my head to the point where my neck hurts now.
It's extremely slow. You get
so long.
If you do this on turn 3, let's just on turn 3, you pay 3 mana. You get 2 triggers of this by turn 7.
No. I mean, yes, that's what happens, but no, I'm out.
It's incredibly slow.
It's way better to just cast it as the 5
mana. 4.
Yeah. Cast it on 4 because you've ramped in some other way.
Yeah.
And then it'll enter, you'll get the land, and then you attack the next turn.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, it's not that good. It just isn't. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you have some way to copy your tokens, but you can't populate it. So there's not a great way right now to abuse the land tokenness.
Yeah. It is the type of card, that's a really good point though, that could become better as the design space opens up and we sort of, some cards incidentally care about land tokens.
Right.
But right now, that hasn't happened often enough that really cards refer to it much.
You can build around Impending, and I do think that's how you, by speeding up this clock in some way. So I want to talk about
you have a deck that has some suspend, has some time counter stuff, Doctor Who things, Shoiro, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of cards that remove counters from permanents,
time bugs and stuff.
Yeah. So Scholar of New Horizons is one I thought of. It's a 2-minute creature that says tap, remove a counter from a permanent you control, search your library for a plains, and reveal it. If an opponent controls more lands than you put it onto the battlefield tapped. So you remove time counters, you get some value, you speed up the clock.
Yep.
You could also blink the enchantment.
Yeah, because when it'll come back in, it wasn't cast with Impending, so it has no counters on it. Yep.
Right. So a Teferi's Time Twist will let you blink any permanent, I think. Or, it's target permanent. So you can blink, as long as you can blink an enchantment, you can get the creature into play for cheaper. But
enchantments aren't that easy to blink.
Paid 5 mana for a 5-mana creature for 2 cards.
Yeah.
So it's a little
Ghostly
less
Flicker will do it, right?
Ghostly Flicker does not blink enchantments.
Crap.
Felia does. White is very good at blinking enchantments. Blue
Makes
has
sense.
a couple, but it is not easy. I wanted to mention this does not work with Solemnity. I've seen people saying that, like, oh, if you cast it with Impending, then it comes in, it doesn't have any counters. But it doesn't become a creature until the last is removed. If there are no counters on it at any point, there are no counters removed.
Interesting.
Yes. People are like, Solemnity! And you're like, no, it is actually a non-vote. So based on that reasoning, a lot of the other overlords are, they're all Impending 4. And they cost either 3 or 4 mana, except for one, which we're going to talk about in a second here. They're too slow. They're too expensive to use for their Impending ability. If you would play it as a creature, play it as a creature.
You're kind of playing it like a Titan, basically, which is like you're going to pay the cost in the top right. Mm-hmm. It's going to enter, give you a thing, and you're going to hope to get an attack in or have haste and get the thing. And then you just compare it at that point to Sun Titan and Frost Titan and the rest. Yeah, Gravy Train, the rest. Yeah.
Yeah. So without any additional synergy, think of them as creatures.
It's too bad because when I first read them, I was like, this sounds cool. And then you start thinking about it, I just can't figure out a way to make it good.
4 is an eternity in Commander.
So long.
It's so long. And we're assuming that they play it on curve, on turn 3.
It's an eternity in any format. Yeah. I had the green one in a limited deck, and I could never Impending it. I always just cast it. It doesn't make any... You could never think of a scenario where do I want this in 4 turns? No, I'll just wait 2 turns and cast it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do other stuff right now.
Yeah. I do want to talk about one of them because this card's great.
Okay.
This is the black one.
Yeah.
It's Overlord of the Baelmerk. 3 black for a 5/5 Avatar Horror with Impending 5, but it costs 1 and a black to cast it for its Impending cost. It says whenever Overlord of the Baelmerk enters or attacks, mill 4 cards, then you may return a non-Avatar creature card or planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand. I would play a card that is 2 mana, mill 4, get a creature from your graveyard back to your hand. And I have. And they're not good. But this is on a creature that you can reanimate, that will repeatedly mill you and repeatedly draw you more cards. It is something you can use from the graveyard on the battlefield. You can cast it for 5, you can cast it for 2. All of those are very powerful modes.
Yeah. It's amazing, too, it costing 2 versus costing 3, even though it's 1 more time counter.
Yeah.
And it's pretty low impact at the worst case. It mills you get a creature back, it costs you 2 mana, and then from there, it's maybe some good things happen with it, but honestly, if nothing does, you're okay for the rest of the game.
You don't really expect it to come off of Impending. If it does, great.
Yeah.
I think this card's the best of the 5 and is really the only one I would play without any additional synergy.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. There's a new land cycle in Duskmourn, and they're sweet.
The lands are cool. Quite powerful as well. So
I
they're
agree.
the Verge lands. Mm-hmm. I'll just read the Dimir one. It's Gloom Lake Verge. It's a land. You can tap it for blue, or you can tap it to add black, but activate only if you control an island or a swamp. And then there are is there one for every color bar?
No. There's a white, blue, blue, black, green, white, red, green, and red, black.
They just had to make it difficult.
They're
saving a couple for...
later.
For Final Fantasy or something.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's only 5. They did half the cycle.
It's only 5. I thought it was 6 for some reason.
No,
Sorry, I'm looking
there's
at
5. These are comparisons.
These are the other ones. Why'd they do 6? That's just
really annoying.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, they did half that. They do that all the time.
Yeah. So these are, in my mind, comparable to the Czech lands that were originally printed in Innistrad, I think, they come in untapped if you have this land or this land.
Yeah. I think these might even be a little better than that.
I think they're better. They come in untapped all the time, which is great. They always tap for mana, and they're only fixing if you have the other one.
Yeah, but the great thing is you can have an island on the Dimir one and still get the black out of it, so you don't have to already have black. So actually will fix you in those cases. Yeah, which I really like about them. They don't work in both directions, and this actually gives them some interesting design. There might have to be 20 of these. Is that how that works? I don't know. I didn't do the math, but because should there be one that taps for black but can tap for blue if you have the thing?
Yeah,
right?
hypothetically, they could do a ton of these.
But either way, I think these are pretty high on the sort of good multiplayer untapped lands.
They're quite good, I think.
Yeah, they're always untapped and they always tap for mana. That is a base is very and colored mana at that. That is a base is just a very high floor. And the fact that the upside is pretty good, but not necessary in a lot of games.
Yeah.
Because by turn 4 or 5 in most games, you're just like, I just want lands that come in untapped so I can continue the same speed of game that everybody else is. Yeah.
Yeah. I play the check lands. I'm very happy with them most of the time. I think these are great. We're not going to go through every land and compare them, but like the big one I wanted to compare it to is the slow lands that we got from Innistrad. The ones that check if you have 2 lands or more. Like Deathcap Glade is the green-black one. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more lands.
Yeah.
So I love those lands. I think they're perfectly playable lands. I think these, are they better?
I think they're absolutely better.
I think they're probably better.
I don't like the slow lands much myself. So I try to shy away. I have some decks that have them, obviously. I don't think they're horrible.
Yeah.
But I would play the Verges over those other ones like
the slow ones.
Every time, basically. Just because sometimes the other ones have to come in tapped. Like that is just, it happens to you. That will not happen with these other ones. Now, the downside is that sometimes you won't get both mana out of them. But I think that's going to be relatively rare. And you usually, in the early game, have enough options in your hand that, I don't have my black yet, I have blue cards I could play. And the later game, you've just had a lot more time to find the land types that would unlock the other half. Yeah. So,
I mean, I think these are really great. The big question is, if I'm playing shocks and fetches in my deck, do these make the cut? Because at this point, it's getting tight.
Yeah. Probably not if you're already at shocks and fetches, right?
If I have shocks and fetches, I don't think there's room. I'm obsessed with the Surveil lands. They feel busted.
They're awesome. Yeah.
And I'm playing all of the ones I can in most of the decks that I have them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in a 5-color deck, I might split, but I would split towards like Battlebond lands first or something, right? So then, shocks and fetches are like near the top of what a mana base is going to be. I mean, obviously you can throw dual lands in there if you've got them, but so if you're already at that step, maybe not. But below that, which is like, I don't have all the fetches or, if you're like me, you got 27 decks. I don't have enough fetches for all those decks.
Absolutely. So, for sure.
So like a lot of my decks don't have fetches and I don't have enough.
They're making do.
Yeah, exactly. So these lands are really good. And I don't think probably if I play a game with one of those decks versus one of my decks that has shocks and fetches, I would really notice the difference, honestly. Yeah. There's enough multicolored lands. And so now at this point, you're looking for untapped lands. That's sort of the bottleneck for you. So I think I would play these over all, except maybe the Surveil lands, I agree, of the lands that have land types but must come into play tapped.
Sure, like the bicycle lands.
Yeah.
Which I have played. So yeah, I would definitely run one of these over a bicycle land.
Yeah, but I think you'd really have to, the Surveil lands kind of cross that line because Surveil is just so good. It's so much better than Scry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. These lands are awesome. Pick them up.
They're great. Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get into some specific cards now, starting at the beginning of the alphabet with Ancient Cellarspawn. 1 black for a 3/3 enchantment creature horror. Each spell you cast that's a demon, horror, or nightmare costs 1 less to cast. And then, whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast it was less than its mana value, target opponent loses life equal to the difference. This is from the Miracle Worker precon, so it's good with the Miracle
stuff.
effect.
Oh, yeah, Miracle's great.
Yeah.
I immediately thought of like Force of Will or something, right? Free spell.
Yeah.
Deal 5 to somebody when you cast that because it's a 5 CMC, but you paid 0. Yeah, that's just mean. Yeah, you should probably deal damage to somebody whose spell you're not countering. Just, Actually, no, it's better to have one person mad than 2 at you. I don't know.
So, yeah, I looked at this card, and originally it wasn't on my list to talk about. I was like, this is pretty narrow. I don't know. There's only specific decks that want it. And the more I thought about it, the more things I was like, I don't know. It's really good with like Deadly Rollick and Snuff Out. It's good with stuff like Douthie Voidwalker that can cast spells for free. It's good with Cascade.
Oh, yeah.
It's good with like Itali, either Itali.
All the Phyrexian mana symbols, like Git Probe.
Like, the list is long. Dread Return, Shriekmaw, like Evoke stuff.
Yep.
Bolus's
Citadel is kind of nuts.
What?
Yeah. I paid 0 mana for all these. I don't know what you're...
Like, even Blasphemous Act is like, I'm going to wipe the board and I'm going to deal
9.
8 to you.
Yeah, 8, yep. Great Henge. I was thinking of, a thing I like to do and I know is very common in artifact decks is just like, you get Ethereum Sculptor, Joyous Familiar, like, stack 3 or 4 of those and then you're just being like, 3 and 4 dropped artifacts are all free and then you just play 5 of them.
Yeah. And you're like...
do 20 then.
That's a win con.
Yeah. It's usually you get in Scrap Trawler loops and you're like, oh God, how do I win out of this? Like I'm doing a lot of stuff. This is like, I'll provide the damage. Just spin those wheels.
You do what you're doing.
Yeah. So I agree that as I thought about it more, I was like, this probably is going to be a good piece in a bunch of decks. But I'm going to say this a lot this episode, and I say it on all the In the 99 episodes, which is like, you look at cards like this and you shouldn't be thinking like, how do I build a deck around this card? You should be thinking, which of my decks already has the fundamental pieces that go around this card so that this card slots into it. So if you already have the Ethereum Sculptor, Jor's Familiar, Foundry Inspector, if you already have that package in a deck and there's black in it, then this card's going to be quite good in it. Bolas Citadel's also in there. You're like, oh, there's 4 or 5 ways that this can just go off and win me a game, then slot it in there. But you don't say, oh, I've got a black deck, I'm going to put this in, and then I'm going to put Ethereum Sculptor and whatever in there, because their deck wasn't built around that already. Right.
Yeah, you typically want how many things in the list? If it's not your commander.
Yeah.
Like, if it is your commander...
And it's reducing costs of stuff.
Yeah.
And not counting the demons and the horrors one, right? Do you play it in every deck that's like a demon deck?
Probably. It just says every time you cast him, you drain him for 1, and it's a ramp piece. I think so.
Yeah, and it's 3 mana. It's pretty good.
You don't get a lot of cheap demons, so you're like, I don't have a lot to do in my early game. I might as well play a ramp spell that's also going to be a win con.
Outside of demons and horror typal decks, how many pieces do you need in your deck that are going to reduce the cost of things before you would sort of start to consider this as a legitimate card to run in your deck?
15?
You think you need that
10,
high?
10? For it to, otherwise it's just a 3 mana 3/3.
Yeah, that's not doing much.
Right?
Yeah. I also think the impact of those cards matters. Like Bolas Citadel all by itself might make this okay, because
you count how many things can go find Bolas Citadel.
Although if you've cast Bolas Citadel and are untapping with it, you might, who cares? You're probably going to win.
A little bit of win more.
Do you need this? Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know the answer to that question.
So my thinking is, I look at this for commanders that are actively trying to reduce the casting cost of stuff is where I'm going to put it most consistently.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I have to look at this for Rakdos, Lord of Riots, obviously.
Yep.
Because the whole idea of Rakdos is dealing damage and
then
making my
big
really expensive colorless spells cost less.
Yep.
So it's very good there. Even stuff like Yennet, Cryptic Sovereign, is, I think, really cool place for it. Casts odd mana spells for free.
Yep.
This is an odd mana spell, which is perfect. And every time you cast one, now you get some additional gravy.
Yep.
The other one I was looking at was stuff that cares about casting high mana value things.
Yeah, so you're just going to cast big stuff.
Right. So like Vial Smasher was the first one I thought of, because you're trying to use delve cards and free spells to...
Oh man, Treasure Cruise with this out is sweet.
Blah, blah, blah. That's awesome. That's sweet.
How could you make Treasure Cruise better?
It deals 8 damage.
That's sweet.
You're like, what?
Oh, I want to do that, yeah.
You have a Vial Smasher.
Yeah, that's true. That's Treasure Cruise, isn't it?
You're ready for this. So I think if you're trying to cast big things to, like, Lord of Pain...
And you're often reducing costs on that, yeah.
That kind of stuff is the decks I would start looking at this.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think that's really smart. I just thought of Keurig as another deck that probably wants it too.
Gross, yeah. Now you're paying life, but so are they.
Yeah, brutal.
Very cool.
All right, the next card is called Come Back Wrong. Really creepy art on this one. It's 2 and a black for a sorcery. Destroy target creature. If a creature card is put into a graveyard this way, return it to the battlefield under your control. Sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step.
Sweet.
Now, an interesting thing here that you noted on our sheet is that this will work with commanders.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no point in time where they'll have the chance to put it back into the command zone because of the rule change that made the commanders hit the graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
It means if I nail Rachel's commander with this, it will die. It will come back under my control. And then, of course, I will have to sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step, which we'll get to in a second.
Unless...
But there will be that scary moment where she's like, you have my commander.
Yep. And you cannot put it in the command zone because there's no point between it dying and it going to the battlefield where you get priority to, like, decide.
Yeah, it needs to fully resolve the spell. And by the time it's resolved, it's on the battlefield under your opponent's control. So it goes to look there and says, do you want to put your commander back in the... Oh, never mind, it's not in the graveyard.
You mentioned the creepy art on this card, and I want to talk about it. So it looks like there's 2 different cards here, but they're actually 2 different collector numbers. Do you know why?
Oh, interesting. No, I didn't even notice that. I thought you just accidentally put it down here.
They have different arts.
What? What's the difference?
There's a spooky monster in the background of some of the
there's a big
printings
spider.
of this card.
Wow. Oh.
So look at your Come Back Wrong twice. See if you got, like, the special collector number, which has, like, a spooky monster in the back, or if it's just the regular one, which doesn't have a spooky monster. But I thought that was a really cute thing from Wizards.
That's cute.
So this card's really sweet. You, as a removal spell, obviously you can kill big impactful creatures that have really powerful ETBs, and that's very good.
Yeah, you just get the ETB. It doesn't give haste or anything, though, so you can't get an attack in.
So, like, it is a static ability. Like, if you kill an Itali Primal Conqueror, this is bananas. That's so powerful. You get an Itali, you get the trigger, and you're like, what? I got to play this card in every deck. That's...
Your mileage is really going to vary, though, because in any given game...
How many Italis are you actually seeing on the board where you're not dead?
Yeah, you're probably just happy to get, like... Yeah. Well, first of all, you're going to destroy things that are big threats to you.
Right.
You're not just going to probably... I guess you could just destroy their Muldrifter to draw 2, but at the same time, usually you want to use removal on things that you don't want them to have and you don't want to be used against you. Hopefully, sometimes those have an ETB on them that you get, but a lot of times that's going to be a big scary creature that you just don't want attacking, the first Itali, the original Itali or something like that, or that are just going to kill you in the air or whatever.
Yeah. And
this will do that, right? And then you get it back, but maybe you can't take advantage of the fact that like is on your battlefield for a second, and that's okay.
Yeah. That's fine. I think the floor of this card is it's a very slow, very expensive removal spell.
Yeah.
Which is fine. The ceiling of this card is really in decks that are trying to sacrifice their own stuff and bring it back to the battlefield.
Interesting, yeah.
I think you look at this card like a bad, weird removal spell, and you need to squint and see Saw in Half.
Yeah.
Saw in Half destroys a creature, makes 2 copies of it. And Saw in Half is best when you're like sawing in half a Grey Merchant of Asphodel.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get 2 ETBs on that. This is a very good combination with Grey Merchant of Asphodel.
Or Kokusha, which is another Saw in Half target.
Exactly. Like anytime that you're abusing the Dies trigger or the Enters trigger and you can kind of do these loop-de-doops, this is a sack outlet and a reanimation target effect in one card. And then you can play it in those decks, and sometimes you'll use it to kill an Itali or an old Gnawbone or something terrible that your opponent has that you get to take advantage of. But most of the time, you're going to use it to get a Dies trigger and a reanimation trigger.
Yeah, get a bit of value,
right?
Get your engine going or whatever. It does become a lot better if you have other sack outlets and stuff too, because even just destroying your opponent's creature and then getting 2 mana off an Ashnod's Altar for it is still pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are some tricks you can pull, and I think that's probably the first thing that Magic Minds try and do is like, okay, I have to sacrifice at the end step. How do I keep it forever?
Yeah.
Yeah, what can I do to keep it forever? That's
there's so many ways.
Yeah, and definitely you can do those things. So Blinking will do it, right? Because it doesn't have anything about leaves the battlefield. Now, it has to return under your control, not owner's control. So watch that wording. But Conjurer's Closet, Cloud Shift, there's a bunch of ways. A bunch of blink spells that will allow you to sort of keep it, quote unquote, forever.
Yeah.
Once it's on your side, blink your own creature, returns under your control. So that is a way to do it.
If you've got a Obeka Brute Chronologist list where you can end the turn, you put the trigger on the stack, and the turn, sorry, your commander's mine.
Forever. Yeah. That's pretty sweet. Yeah. If you have Sundial of the Infinite, the same sort of deal, often go in the same decks.
Yeah. So those kind of tricks can always happen. I was looking up things that reanimate, like when a thing dies, it returns under your control.
Oh, interesting.
I was like, does Malakir Rebirth work? No, it doesn't. But Kaya's Ghost Form does. So that's narrow combination. If you have those two, you're like, what? But
what are you doing with the Kaya's Ghost Form in your deck? You're probably doing tricky things. This is another tricky thing you can do.
It's a tricky thing.
Yeah.
So
you can stifle the trigger.
Yeah.
So you can stifle that sacrifice trigger. And so, again, there's a thing where if you just already have a deck that has a couple stifle effects in it, then this becomes a little bit better for your deck, and I would consider it just because you do have that upside of like, I steal their commander or whatever forever. And I think, you can look at decks in that way. Oh, I've got a couple sack outlets. Maybe it's not an Aristocrats deck, but I have a couple sack outlets. I got a couple stifle effects. I have a Sundial of the Infinite in there for some other thing. And then it's like, all of a sudden, I got 4 or 5 ways to take, what's this called? Come back worse and...
Come back wrong.
Come back wrong. Worse. Oh, wrong. Yeah,
it's worse
Come back
too.
wrong. Yeah. To take that from just a regular removal spell to a decent chance of like, it's a control magic or something in addition to it. And then all of a sudden, I think you can start to really, really think about replacing another removal spell with this, because another removal spell, it'll destroy a creature for 1 less mana, but it never has the upside of I keep it.
I would honestly replace a reanimation effect with this, or replace something else with this. This gives you another removal spell. It gives you a proactive thing. I think this is the kind of vegetables that are fun to put into a deck.
Yeah.
And you should use that opportunity to like expand your removal suite, give you a little bit more interaction.
Yeah, that's great.
Up next is a battle. We're a battle. Oh my gosh. Up next is a room.
Definitely
sideways.
Yeah, it's definitely not a battle.
The sideways one.
Listen, when you said battle, my brain didn't even say.
Yeah, you're like, the sideways
one. I was like, the sideways thing. Yeah.
This one is Dollmaker's Shop / Porcelain Gallery. So the first door, Dollmaker's Shop, is 1 and a white. Whenever one or more non-toy creatures you control attack a player, create a 1/1 white toy artifact creature token. Sure. For 2 mana, nice. Yep. For 6 mana, 4 white, creatures you control have base power and toughness, each equal to the number of creatures you control. Whoa, this is a token maker with a payoff.
Yeah, this is both sides of the strategy.
Right. This doesn't do anything on its own. You have to have a creature that can attack to make the toys.
Yep.
But this is the kind of card that'll help you snowball, which in white is kind of hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard to have something that wants to attack. You can get up to 3 toys if you attack each player, but you don't have to do that. And once you have done that successfully, you have enough of these lying around to continue to attack. Now, it's non-toy creatures. They won't trigger off the tokens you do.
Off the toys, yeah.
Yeah. So there's some downside, obviously. It's not exactly Bitter Blossom or something like that.
Yeah.
But in some ways, it can be better than Bitter Blossom type effects because you can make multiple toys. In some ways, obviously worse. But the thing about Bitter Blossom is it doesn't have a Crater Hoof-like effect stapled onto it, which this does.
Yeah. I'm high on this card.
Yeah,
because when I'm playing white, I play a lot of cheap creatures. I play a lot of evasive creatures. I love Selfless Spirit. I love Restless Sacrifices to Exile the Graveyard.
Yep.
That one.
Yep. Everybody knows what we're talking about, definitely.
2 mana, 2/1 flyers. I like playing those because they wear swords very well and they trigger effects like this.
They can always get attacks in.
Exactly. And it's just sort of a plan in a box. It is the kind of thing that people are going to keep an eye on. Which is fine. If they spend a removal spell on this, you're totally fine with that.
You spent 2 mana on it.
Yeah.
It didn't cost you anything.
You build around the 2 mana side. If you get to the 6 mana side, that's great. Something that I would mention is white's overrun effects tend to be very incremental.
Yeah.
They tend to be like Felidar Retreat. When you play a land, you get counters. Or they're like Cathar's Crusade, which can kind of explode, but like...
You have to do 2 or 3 things.
You have to play some things after it to make stuff happen. Their explosive overruns are the ones that we tend to play more. So Moonshaker Cavalry, Achroma's Will, even Mirror Entity, which isn't very good, but does that explosive all-at-once pump that is so powerful in Commander.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. It says, I have a lot of stuff, now I can convert that into winning the game right now. And that's very powerful.
And the thing I love about this card is that you don't have to play the small side first if you draw it late.
Yeah.
They don't know that you've got it in all scenarios. If you drew it early, sure, you're going to use it as a make my board wide piece. And then if it's still around, I'll also use it as the win con pump my board piece. But I'll still have Moonshaker Cavalry and stuff in my deck. So it's not like, oh, if I lose that, oh no, I can't win. But there is that other mode where you draw it, it's turn 7 already, and you're like, oh, well now I'm just going to sandbag this for a turn or 2 until my board's big. They won't see it coming. And now it is my Moonshaker Cavalry. And token decks and go wide decks, there are just 2 components to that strategy at its base level. Make a lot of creatures, make those creatures big. This card does both things. And there are just are not very many cards that do both sides of that coin. For this reason, it's too powerful to the strategy.
Powerful.
Yeah. If your whole deck was this, it would be hard to beat because it's just like whichever side of that piece you need, you have it. That's why Felidar Retreat is so good, right?
Yeah.
It's slow, but it does both things.
And it's the payoff. Yeah.
Felidar Retreat, one of my favorite cards of all time, too. It's
oh
just
my gosh.
This inevitability. So
when you have it in play, you're like, well, at least I'm doing something.
Yeah.
You know?
My turn can never be that bad.
Yeah. I made a creature and I attacked. It was all sweet.
Yeah. So I think this card's very strong. I like
agree.
it a lot.
Up next, so this is another cycle of enchantment
Another good
creatures. The one that we're going to talk about is Enduring Curiosity. This is the blue one.
Yeah. The whole cycle is enduring something, right?
Yeah. It's enduring cute little guy, except for the black one, which
they're all
is a
glimmers,
snake.
Right? Except for is the black one a glimmers?
Yeah, they're all glimmers.
Okay.
It's just a snake.
Got it.
It's a cute little snake. I'm sorry. It's a cute little snake. I'm so
It's
sorry.
not like Bloomborough cute, but just like, it's for Duskmourn, it's very cute.
If you think snakes are cute, it's a cute little snake. So these are sort of the inverse of the Impending ones, where it's when they enter as creatures, and then when they die, they return to the battlefield as enchantments.
I didn't think about it that way. Yeah. They're creatures first and then they become enchantments, whereas Impending is enchantments first and then become creatures. I mean, Impending, but yeah.
Right.
Okay, cool.
So these are better because they're creatures first.
Yeah, they're all better across the board, basically.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about all of them because a lot of them are very familiar effects that we already play in Commander. And if you play this kind of effect, you probably put them in your deck.
If you play Welcoming Vampire, then play the white one.
the little lamb, Enduring Innocence. If you play
it looks like a Spectro
Cryptolith, right, you play Enduring Vitality.
Yep.
It's just those are good cards. They come in as creatures, and when they die, they're enchantments now. Perfect.
Yep.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it is just kind of better versions of those other cards, honestly.
Yeah.
And this one is a better version of the other cards too, I think.
In multiple ways. Yeah, we want to read the blue one.
So it is Enduring Curiosity, 2 blue for an enchantment creature. It's a cat glimmer. It has flash. It's a 4/3. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. And then it has the Enduring clause, which is when Enduring Curiosity dies, if it was a creature, return to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment. It's not a creature.
So we play these. Right? This is Bident of Thassa.
Yep.
This is Reconnaissance Mission.
Yep.
Even Coastal Piracy sees play these days.
Yep. But none of those are creatures that can trigger themselves.
None of them have flash.
I mean, I think it's just better on every level than those
I agree.
cards. Yeah.
The only one that's like comparable to me is the Indomitable, because it has like other upsides as a 6/6 with trample, and
you do have to crew it,
graveyard.
though. Yeah.
You do have to crew it, but
Doesn't have flash.
there's so many cool things you can do with a 4/3 that has flash, especially one that when it dies, it just comes back and you still get value out of it.
It's so good. Yeah. Just the base level of like, you just cast on the end step before your turn and then attack with it on your turn and draw a card. That's like the most modest scenario, but that's great. Never mind the times when you like flash it in when they didn't block because they didn't know you had this, and you're like, oh, I'm just getting in with 2 little creatures and I'm going to draw a couple cards. You know, you have your commander, maybe I think any deck where the commander is flying, you could think about playing this. Flash it into block. Flash it into block, trade with a thing, yours dies, comes back as an enchantment. Now it's a removal spell that draws you cards. Like, there's so many back-breaking scenarios. That's the great thing about all these is you don't care that much that they die.
Yeah.
And as the format has gotten faster, these do-nothing enchantments have gotten harder to play. I talk about Vedalken Ori, how I love that card, but I can't play it anymore. If Vedalken Ori was a creature with flash, I totally could play it.
Yeah.
Because you can justify it as a blocker, right? I'm dying. I'm playing against Rachel. She's going to attack me with stuff. I can't play Bident of Thassa, but I can play this card. And sometimes the upside is just really, really good. And sometimes it's like, yeah, like you said, flash in, block, it dies. I have an enchantment that I can use, and I'm fine in that scenario. Didn't take the damage, whatever. Yeah, but sometimes you're like, I have 6 creatures out.
Yeah.
You know, some of them have flying.
And you're playing blue.
Off to the races.
Like, you have a ton of instants in your deck. You can hold up interaction. You can hold up draw spells. You can hold up this cat.
Yeah.
Gives you a ton of options.
It's really, like we always talk about
Yeah.
with counterspells and things. It's like, oh, I didn't have to counter anything. Now I can put this out. Yeah. You can't do that with a Reconnaissance Mission.
Yeah.
So you have to play it out and then cross your fingers, and everybody knows shields are down.
Yep. I love this cat. This is the one I'm highest on for sure.
This I put this in my Nico deck if you watch the Game Nights episode of Duskmourn, because if you can make 8 copies of it,
gross,
turn all your shards into it, then all of them draw you 8 cards. You actually have to be careful and not turn all of your, like, not attack with all of the shards when you make too
Otherwise
many.
You draw like, you deck yourself? Yeah. Because
if you have 8 of them and they all hit, you'll draw 64 and probably die. So you're like, I have 8.
What a way to go.
I have 8 of those. I can only attack with 3. I only want to draw 24, yeah.
Yeah, this is sweet. I like this card a lot.
Very cool.
There is a new card. This is from the Death Toll precon called Formless Genesis. 2 and a green for a Kindred Sorcery Shapeshifter. It has Changeling, and it says create an XX colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling and Death Touch, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. Then retrace. It also has retrace, so you can discard a land from your hand and cast it from the graveyard, and it stays in your graveyard. You can cast it as many times as you want for the number of lands.
Retrace means you can cast a spell from the graveyard if you discard a land in addition to paying its cost. Yep. So this is just sort of endless XX changelings.
Yeah, and the more lands you discard, the bigger it gets.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting card. This is a sorcery with Changeling, which always, I think anything with Changeling, we look at extra hard. Commander players love Changeling. But this is a very narrow type of effect. So the big question is, what do you do with this?
When I saw it, and you wrote this down as well, the first thing I thought of was it creates an endless supply of a creature type or of a changeling, of all creature types. So any sort of, on the fringe, out there decks, and I know people like to build these. I've played them myself. They're cool. that's like, man, they're reaching for playables as far as number of scarecrows that exist or whatever it is.
This is so good with Reaper King. Gross.
But traditionally, there's just not very many of that type, and so it's been hard to like, you're always like, your last 5 to 6 of that creature type are like not that good.
Right.
This is like replaces one of those, and once you get in your hands, you're going to feel really good. I can just always hit my creature type, and some decks just have trouble doing that. Not zombie decks or whatever, but like certain ones. And then there's also the rise of kind of the all creature types decks that are sort of starting to be more viable now, where it's like it's taking a bunch of interesting, like a demon trigger and a dragon trigger and a elf trigger, and then it's like a changeling comes in and like somehow does weird stuff with all that stuff. And I've seen a few decks like that, and this goes really well in that type of deck too, which I really like. Which again are fringe decks because they've been hard to put together up till now, and this is another piece.
Yeah.
So I really like that about it.
There's a lot of it's cool that it's a sorcery, but it also gives you the cast trigger for casting a spell of that type.
Yep.
For casting a brushwag.
Yep.
But also the ETB triggers because it makes a token of it entering, and then you have this. Like if you're flooding out, you just can always have an insect to cast or something like that.
Yep.
The decks where that are gonna use it best are the ones that can use the graveyard, or self-milling. So there's like a lot of insect decks that use this very well. Zask or like Grist are all very good places for this. The one I'm excited about is Hawkball.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's no shortage of merfolk. We got merfolk spells. But Hawkball's really, really good at drawing lands.
Yeah,
and this turns all of the lands I'm drawing off of all the merfolk on the battlefield into another merfolk. And I'm not committing more merfolk to the board because it's this one thing I can
board
keep
wiping,
casting.
my hand's still full.
Like half the merfolk don't do anything anyway. I'm happy to just have more merfolk bodies on the battlefield, and I have 6 lands in hand anyway.
Did you hear that, Prof? Merfolk don't do anything.
There's so many bad merfolk that you play anyway. You're like, it's a 2-mana 2/1 flying merfolk,
it's true.
but it's going to wear 3 counters, so I guess it's good.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, and it also is a sorcery with Kindred.
Yeah.
Which for Delirium and things like that, it is multiple card types and difficult ones to get. Kindred's particularly hard to get. So there's also sort of that aspect of it. If something's counting the number of card types in your graveyard, this is something you can think about playing just for that.
Yeah, this is a neat card. I think it's going to be a real role player in a lot of different strategies that are really excited to see this card. I like the design on it a lot. So excited to see what you're doing with Formless Genesis. I'm sure it's something completely bizarre.
Well, and there's probably decks with Hermit Druid where it's just like, I'm playing this because when I do it, it's going to make 20/20s with Death Touch.
Yeah, I mean, that rules.
Yeah, and it's like, I have 2 of those and I give them Trample. It's kind of over for somebody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think this is cool, and it's mostly in there for cast triggers. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about for the first half of this episode. We still have lots of cool cards from Duskmourn, including the big Planeswalker, a sequel to a very powerful card in Commander.
Yep.
And more coming after a few words from our sponsors.
Hey Josh, what you brewing?
A health deck.
Don't you mean life gain?
Nope. I'm trying to eat healthier, but I'm a better deck brewer than I'm a meal planner, so health deck.
Well, you could start by cutting this Korean barbecue card.
What? No way. God, this is tough. It's hard to cut the things I like, but the healthy stuff is expensive. It just totally throws off my curve.
Well, if you want some easy and inexpensive tech, check out ORGAIN. I've been loving their new 30-gram protein shakes as a way to get more nutrition. They help me manage my hunger and maintain a more healthy lifestyle. Even if you're not a bodybuilder, protein is still key to a healthy diet, and ORGAIN shakes actually taste really good without a ton of sugar or artificial sweeteners.
Whoa, that is good. Nice. Easy upgrade.
Wait, this isn't food, this is Ristic Study. Why is this in here?
For card draw? Duh.
ORGAIN 30-gram protein shakes are available at Costco and Orgain.com. If you want to get in on the delicious protein-packed nutrition today, head to Orgain.com/command and use code COMMAND for 20% off your order. Once again, that's ORGAIN.com/command for 20% off. And make sure you use our promo code COMMAND so they know we sent you.
We now convene a meeting of the Council of Tripplers.
For damage, I am Jessica Thrice Reborn.
For tokens, we are O'Hare Talk.
And for mana, I am Nyxbloom Ancient.
Today, we add a new member to our ranks.
Welcome, Liquid IV, the hydration multiplier that delivers 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. Times 3, praise be!
I drink it before battle to keep focused and alert. 1 stick of liquid IV plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Just tear, pour, live more.
I ramp up for my autumnal color change with their hydration multiplier, plus energy. It includes natural caffeine and comes in delicious flavors like blackberry peach.
We drink it for long plane rides. We like guava.
So 3 cheers for liquid IV, because doublers are good.
But triples is best.
Start a new fall ritual with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code COMMAND at checkout.
That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code COMMAND at liquidiv.com.
Yes! I win! Probably. Anyway.
Probably. What's going on?
I just goldfished a huge turn on Architect. Check it out, they've got the best playtester in the business. Playing and tapping your cards is as simple as clicking them. Everything goes right where you want it, but you can drag things by hand and group them together in different ways too. Then there's easy shortcut keys for things like making copies, sending cards between zones, and starting the next turn.
Nice, so this is a Traxa. All that proliferating's gotta take a while.
It doesn't actually. Just right click and hit proliferate all counters.
Oh wow. Yeah, you probably do win.
I think so.
Architect is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to architect.com/command-zone to get started.
That's archidekt.com/command-zone.
All right, we are back. We are talking about the cards that go in your 99 from Duskmourn, House of Horror.
Yeah, and this one we're starting with a weed whacker? I don't know. It's Hedge Shredder. 2 green for an artifact vehicle. It's a 5/5. When it attacks, you may mill 2 cards. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped. Crew 1. Wow.
A lot of buzz about this card. Yep. You know, Sam and Evan, they made a cool, I think it was Evan that did most of it, but
yeah.
They made a cool animation of this card that we played in a Duskmourn thing we did for Wizards. So, you know, I'm sure that our editors are playing that for you right now. Yeah.
Okay, so I first looked at this card and I was like, wow, that seems busted.
Yeah.
That seems busted. Whenever you mill a land, it goes to the battlefield.
Pretty strong.
Right, it's into from the graveyard.
Whenever you mill 1 or more land cards, put
so they
them.
Go to your graveyard, leave the battlefield, go leave the graveyard, go to the battlefield. Wow.
It's graveyard from library, so you couldn't discard them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I was just trying if it was a replacement effect if they don't go to your graveyard.
Oh, they still do. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, how gross is this with Get Rug? And you're like, very
about
gross.
as gross as you can get.
Get Rug, gross guy. And then the more you think about it, you're like, okay, it's a 4-mana vehicle that when it attacks, it mills, but you have to be sort of milling in other ways.
Yeah, you have to set up a mill engine of some kind probably before you play this. I guess you don't have to do it before because they're probably not going to remove it, but it's hard to remove. It's a vehicle. But at the same time, like, the mill from this can't be the plan for this, right?
Right. I would think of this as on its floor, it's a 4-mana enchantment that says when you mill, you get lands from your to the battle.
Yeah, it's a really good way to think of it. Think of it as an enchantment.
Like, it's a 5/5 sometimes, but most of the time, this is going to just not be a creature. And you're not really going to be attacking with it as much as you think.
It's a decent payoff, I think, if your deck is pretty focused on mill, though, because how many lands do you have to get off this thing before you're happy with it? Where like it did what I would hope its average would be.
4 mana to get 2 lands is an explosive vegetation, right?
Right.
So I would want more than that.
So you want 3?
Probably, I would say at least 3.
4 mana to get 3 lands is insane, though.
It's very good. You probably play that. 4 tapped lands over time. So it is slower than those. That says like 4 mana get 2 lands right now. This says 4 mana get some lands at a later point.
And like Skyshard Claim, they're untapped. These are tapped.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't consider this a ramp card.
This leaves a thing around, though, that does mill you, is a 5/5 in some, probably most cases.
It's more live in the later game than those cards are, which is good.
Yeah.
So it has more utility than those cards. It has a higher upside, obviously, but you do need to have an engine going already for this to do much.
Yeah, I don't think you could just put this in and think of it. For most decks, an Explosive Vegetation will be better than this card. Because at least Explosive Vegetation is going to do the thing it's going to do, where this, if you don't have a bunch of mill going on and you're counting on it to be its own mill triggers, it's going to be really slow.
Right.
But if you are a deck that's milling, that's like dedicating some portion, I don't know what, to self-mill, I think it becomes quite good.
It'll definitely get you a lot of lands. The question is, do you have something to do with those lands? Like, if you're already milling and you're doing what the deck intends to do, it's a self-mill deck, what are you doing with the lands in the late game that get you forward? Like, I would want it to be a landfall deck, or like it matters that, or an expel deck, something that I can take advantage of all the mana that I have right now.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I'm winning the game because that's what you use a lot of mana to do.
Sure.
And generally, I feel like most games are won by somebody who just does them a lot first, or the most first.
Right.
Like, everyone kind of does the same amount. I do 5 mana worth of stuff, you do 5 mana, then I do 6, then you do 6. And suddenly somebody set up something where they do 12 mana worth of stuff when everybody else did 6. And that tends to me to like decide games more often than a lot of other things. And this could give you that. And I like the fact that it's 4 mana as a setup, has a body attached to it, has somewhat of an engine, but, you know, could still, I play this, I have the mill set up. I'm going to get a couple lands, but I can still leave some removal open. And then next turn, you know, if in the course of 2 turns I can get 5 or 6 lands in play, that could be game winning.
That seems very good, yeah.
But you can only do that if you've got Hermit Druids and Stitcher Suppliers. And, you know, that is a main part of your plan, is milling yourself.
Right.
If Hogak would be good as your commander or in your deck, then this card will be good in your deck. But if Hogak wouldn't be good in your deck, then regardless of colors, if that kind of like,
I've just found that like if I'm doing a lot of self-milling, I'm cheating my mana cost, right? Like, I'm trying to cast a Living Death and reanimate my whole graveyard. I'm trying to like, I'm using my graveyard for something else, and usually it doesn't, if I have more mana, it's not necessarily going to take this deck to the late game. Like, if Sidisi has 20 lands, she can do a ton of stuff, but like, I'm fine working on 6 because I can cast, you know, the Lumra, get all my lands back from the graveyard, trigger a bunch of landfall triggers, that kind of thing. But there's like more utility to the lands there than just like having a bunch of lands on the next turn. So this is more narrow than it looks to me. I wouldn't put this in every self-mill deck.
Yeah, I don't know if I put it in every, but I am of a different philosophy where I think like a Stormkill Artist, if I can find that for any of my strategies, that will help me win a lot of games. Because the way that I lose games is I have to do a certain amount, but I also need to be able to stop my opponents. And that just requires the resource of mana.
Yeah.
And I find that often that's the most common resource that is bottlenecking me, you know, where it's like I have to make the decisions of advancing versus stopping. And this means you can have your cake and eat it too at a certain point. And I like those cards where it's like, put this down, go. I have my answers up. If I untap with this thing, I now can incrementally start to gain advantage because now I can do more each turn, which will snowball into more next turn. And then eventually I can make my moves and be safe from you because I was able to hold up my interaction this whole time. But whereas when you're cramped on mana, sometimes you're like, I got to make a move and I'm going to shields down. Yeah. And that gives them the window of like, I'm not going to be able to interact. Let's hope they don't have anything. And I hate being in that position. But I think we are intrinsically different players in that way. But that's why this Hedge Shredder, to me reads...
it is a bit of a Hedge Shredder.
Yeah. to me reads... a little bit stronger. I still don't think it goes in every deck, but I think I would try it out in most decks that are trying to mill themselves.
One thing that I'm just realizing right now, which seems obvious in retrospect, is the crab. When the land enters the battlefield, you mill yourself for 3, and then if you hit a land, you Hedron Crab.
Yeah, really good.
It seems is obviously very
insane.
powerful with this card.
I mean, there's certainly some combos with the card, and I think if you've got those, you could, you know, potentially just like get every land in your deck out and play, and that's going to be really, really good. So, yeah, I think combo-wise, of course, but those are less fun to talk about. Obviously, run that if you're going to. Then the sort of, you know, what are the optimal scenarios and the suboptimal scenarios so that you can lean towards one and away from the other. Yeah.
It's a cool card. I'm excited to... It's going to kick my butt at some point. I just am not quite as high on it as the average person. Okay. Up next, this card is sick. It's Kaito.
It's very cool design. I like
really
the design
neat.
of this a lot. Oh, crap. I threw Kaito's paper on the ground.
No! All right, I'll read Kaito. Kaito, Bane of Nightmares. 2 blue-black for a legendary planeswalker Kaito. It has ninjutsu with 1 blue and a black. Ninjutsu says return an unblocked attacker you control to hand, put this card onto the battlefield from your hand, tapped and attacking. So
it's a planeswalker.
It's a planeswalker with ninjutsu. That's so sick. During your turn, as long as Kaito has 1 or more loyalty counters on him, he's a 3/4 ninja creature and has hexproof. Cool. So once you get him into play, he hits for 3. And then his plus ability is +1. It says you get an emblem with ninjas you control, get +1/+1. He's a ninja. Pretty sick. And then it is a 0 ability that says Surveil 2. Then draw a card for each opponent who lost life this turn. What? Then it has a -2 that says tap target creature, put 2 stun counters on it. He enters with 4 loyalty.
Very cool design. Very, very cool design.
It's such a sick card.
Yeah, yeah. I really like it. I don't know how powerful it is. I mean,
I think it's
good
fun.
in certain scenarios, but it is. I just love the design on it. Yeah.
First thing to mention is that ninjutsu is an activated ability, so it cannot be countered. So this is a way to sort of sneak him into play. If you return an unblocked creature, sneak him into play. They can't counter it unless they have a stifle type effect, which is sweet.
Yep.
Second thing is his 0 ability says Surveil 2, then draw a card for each opponent who lost life this turn.
No, it's not even.
It's not dealt damage. It's not dealt combat damage. It's lost life. And that's very interesting. So even if you pay 4 mana for this, if you pay 4 mana for this and you tap a pinger and everybody loses a life, Surveil 2, draw 3 for 4.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Leaves behind a Planeswalker.
Yep.
I think that's where this card's ceiling is in Commander, is that 0 ability.
Yeah, you're really going to try and like deal, damage to every single player every turn and then draw cards off of Kaito. Yeah. I mean, presumably the turn it comes in, it was an unblocked creature that he deals 3 to that player, and then you could always at least draw 1 that turn if you wanted.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do the emblem, and I do like that it has sort of this removal aspect of it too, because often it's very hard to play a Planeswalker because you just look out and you're like, well, they'll just attack it for free and kill it. And this at least has a removal thing on it. The stun is a removal, right? It just says, okay, that creature I don't have to worry about for 2 turns, which is long enough in Commander that like, it's high-class problems if you still have Kaito after 2 turns.
Sure.
So I like that it has that, too, where it's like, hey, I can play it here, cheat it out for a little bit free, do a little damage, have this Planeswalker sitting around, and stop the one thing that would kill it. And then it's like, it might be hard to get at. And then by that time, I get a whole nother turn to kind of gather myself, get some defenses up, or just damage everybody and draw the cards and then, sure, kill it at that point.
I mean, it's also worth thinking about that this is a creature on your turn. So it has like Gideon things where you can blink this.
Yeah.
As long as you're blinking it on your turn, you can play it, activate it, blink it, activate it again.
That's great.
Which is foul.
Yeah.
If you've had somebody lose life in some other way, like you can draw 6 cards with this with anything that blinks creatures, as long as you can do it, before your end step.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So there's some very high upside to this card, and it can just be stun that thing, you stay. For a little bit of time as well.
It's just it'll present interesting problems to your opponents too, just because of the way the card is constituted, right? It's a creature sometimes, it's got a hexproof sometimes, it's ninjutsu, can be snuck out, it can stun things, it can draw you cards. It's like, geez, it's going to be annoying to stare across against and be like, I really don't want him to have that, but it's hard to get at it. Yeah, they're blinking it, they're stunning stuff, they're drawing cards, like, crap.
Stop!
Yeah.
Stop! This is obviously very good in ninja decks. The other place I was thinking of it is like in either Alayla, it's very good. Anytime you're making a bunch of little flying creatures where you can attack them for free, get those little points of life loss down, draw the cards, you can ninjutsu him in if you want to, or you can just cast it.
It'll be interesting to see how good it is in ninjutsu decks because they're not good at blocking, and that would be my worry is like, sure, I get the emblem, but then they just kill it, and I wouldn't really play the card for 1 emblem. So you got to get a couple of emblems for that to be worth it.
It's like 3 mana ninjas get +1/+1.
Yeah. Ninjas don't block well though. So what are you doing to make it so they don't just kill it? Yeah.
Interesting. Very cool card. I'm excited to see it show up. The next card we're going to talk about is one of the big ones for the set.
The sequel. It is Meathook Massacre II, Black, 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 and XX.
Black, 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 Black.
Wait. 4 black.
Yeah.
Did I say black, black, black?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Black, 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 black.
There it is.
And XX. You got all that, right?
Yeah.
For a legendary...
It's Meathook Massacre times 2.
Yeah, exactly. For a legendary enchantment, when Meathook Massacre 2 enters, each player sacrifices X creatures. So
each player sacrifices X creatures.
Yeah, each player sacrifices X creatures. So if you play 6, each player will sacrifice 1.
Okay.
8, each player sacrifices 2, so on. Whenever a creature you control dies, you may pay 3 life. If you do, return that card under your control with a finality counter on it. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they may pay 3 life. If they don't, return that card under your control.
What?
With a finality counter on it.
Okay.
So 6 mana, everybody sacks 1 creature, you pay 3 life, get yours back with a finality counter, and then your opponents probably pay 3 life. So it's as if they all lost 3, sacked a creature, and you lost 3 and didn't sacrifice a creature.
Yeah. Got another ETB.
Then that's 6 mana.
Yeah.
It's a lot of mana. I just want to have a quick aside. No, let's talk about the card first, and then I'll have the aside later.
First things first.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
It's hilarious.
It's
a
so
sequel,
funny.
of course.
It does
a horror
similar
movie sequel.
things. It's a sequel.
Double the cost, yeah.
And there's a lot going on that's really, really cool about this card.
It's super clever.
It is very clever.
Is it good?
I kept looking at these prices, and it's like 4 black, 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 black. Each player sacks 2, loses 6. What? That's not enough. I can't pay 8 mana, 4 of it black.
It's pay 6 life. Each of your opponents loses 6 life and sacks two creatures.
Yeah.
If you think of it that way.
Yeah, but you also sack 2 and
well, you
pay 3
get them
and
back.
get
So
yours
yeah.
back. And then I was like, well, what if they have tokens? Then this is a disaster. Then Then they
Has
don't
all the
even pay
problems of
the
edicts.
life. And this evaluation is assuming they pay. Most of the time, they're just gonna pay.
Yeah, it's 10 mana for 3. It doesn't scale particularly well. As you go up, usually with X spells, you go, well, at 3 mana, it's not that good, but at 9 mana, it's really good. And you go with this one, and you're like, well, at 10 mana,
it's not quite.
Everybody sacks 3. They might not even have 3. Do you have 3? You get 3 back, but it costs you 9 life. They lose 9 life, maybe. 10 mana, was that worth it?
Yeah, 10's a lot.
I'd rather just Torment of Hellfire for 9. Yeah.
So when this card gets interesting to me is when you think of it as a black, 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 a 4 mana enchantment.
Right, because remember, you don't have to play it as with X can be equal 0, which means when it comes in, it just has those second 2 abilities, but it doesn't cause a sacrificing of creatures to happen. You're going to use other cards to make creatures die, your own and your opponents, and just use it as just an enchantment that just ignores that first sentence. Yeah.
Then you think of it as like a very expensive lifeline kind of thing.
The recursion, I think, is really powerful.
Right. Then it starts, you're like, okay, I see where this is going. Now I understand. And it's like, and then you think of the X's as upside.
Yeah, exactly. And when you sort of flip it on its head and you go, oh, its base is, it doesn't cause any edicts. And that just is a thing I can do if I have the mana for it. It actually looks a lot better under those lights. Yeah, because you're like, oh, now it's the Gray Merchant thing again, where I'm like, I just sack that and then get it back and then get another trigger.
And
Kokusho.
It's got 4, Kokusho exiles. Because of the finality counter. So
but you still get a Kokusho trigger, right? You sack it, then it comes back.
Yeah. Then you have the 5/5, and the dice trigger doesn't work the second time, but you still get the Kokusho trigger.
Yeah.
Plague Crafters is obviously really, really powerful with this because it triggers all of the things again.
Yeah, if you have Merciless Executioner, Plague Crafter, all that in your deck,
this seems quite powerful.
Then you put this in there because it's brutal. Yeah, because they have to sack 2 creatures to the one you sacrifice plus pay the life, otherwise you get those things.
Right. I think the first time I looked at this, I did the exact same thing I did with Meathook Massacre, where I was like, this is a really expensive board wipe.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's an enchantment.
Yeah.
It's an enchantment
that can board wipe.
It can. It'll kill some stuff.
Yeah.
And it'll do that, and that's great. And it gets you additional value throughout the game. Relax.
Yeah.
Not everything is immediate. And this is that, right? If you pay for 6, you get some value out of it right away. None of that is what your opponent wants to happen. It's very expensive, but black is good at making a ton of black mana. In terms of devotion, I'm least afraid of a lot of black pips because you're playing Cabal rituals and coffers and Urborg, and you can make black mana very easily.
You already have had to worry about it. You got Bolas of Citadel and things like that in your deck, Necropotences and things like that. So you already are knowing I gotta have a lot of specific black mana that I can create.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this becomes really good if you just have a Toxic Deluge in your hand also, right? It's insane there.
Yep.
You just use 2 cards to get 10 cards worth of value.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, something I learned when playing my Athreos deck, is that if you have this card in your deck, you should pick an opponent to hit and get them low. And you should probably choose the opponent that has the most good creatures, because what happens is you don't need to get the creatures from everybody. You just say, oh, I've been picking on, Jimmy, just to choose a name out of thin air, this game, and I got his life low enough that he can't afford to pay for it. And so now, the other two people will pay, but Jimmy can't. And I'm going to get all of his creatures when they die.
Jimmy's a Tali.
Yep. Now when I board wipe, they pay the life, he can't, I get stuff. And that's when you turn that corner, where you're like, damnation, get my 3 things back, get Jimmy's 3 things. Now they're screwed.
Right.
Because they're like,
that was not good.
Yeah, crap. If we stop that, what happens next? Probably a similar thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And the finality counters obviously keeps this from doing loop-de-doops, but it doesn't matter. You've had twice the number of creatures that everybody else has. So I think predictably it is worse than its predecessor, like many sequels.
Yeah. Probably is because because the original is a great card.
The original is great. It's a classic.
It's a classic, yeah. It's the Godfather 2 debate.
And this one's just so fun. And if you love the first one, you probably love this one.
Yeah, you got those characters you loved returning.
Yeah.
Like that hand.
Love
probably
that guy.
there, yeah.
Love
Actually,
that
it is
guy.
somewhere in there. My aside before we go is in that same video that I referenced earlier for the Hedge Shredder, a lot of people didn't notice it, but the Lord of Pain is talking on the screens, but right to the left of the Lord of Pain is this stack of VHS tapes. And we'll put a picture online, or we'll put a picture on the video right now, but you'll see that we made up all these fake movie titles.
They're very good.
Meathook Massacre II is in there as well.
Yeah, it gotta be.
Yeah, my favorite one is Rosewater's Baby.
All right, up next, another black card. This one is Metamorphosis Fanatic. 4 black for a 4/4 human cleric with lifelink. When Metamorphosis Fanatic enters, return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. Miracle, 1 and a black.
Ooh.
I love this card. I think this card's very fun. So 6 mana creature, ETB, reanimated creature.
Right. With lifelink counter on it.
With a lifelink counter on it, which I keep forgetting, but matters.
Yeah.
Lately, lifelink feels better and better and better.
In my mind, the first time I read it, I thought finale because they keep doing that. And I was like, oh, wait, no, there's way better.
It's like only upside.
Yeah.
The first thing I wanted to mention with this card is I think black is the easiest color to set up creature miracles.
Interesting.
Because black's very good at taking cards from your graveyard and putting it on top of your library. So Mortuary Myers, Witch's Clinic, Golgari Thug, Haunted Crossroads, Volrath Stronghold if you fancy. It's like $80 or something like that.
Also Vampire Tutor,
that kind of stuff. So it's very easy to set up a miracle, especially when it's on a creature in black. So I definitely looked at it through that lens. But also, black is really good at reanimating creatures that are bigger.
Yep.
And it's very good at paying life, so the lifelink is even better.
Yeah, you want the life because you're going to spend it.
Like, we played Junji the Midnight Sky and Phyrexian Delver, which is a 5-mana one that literally is reanimate when it enters the battlefield. And Phyrexian Delver is so limiting because you can't do what you want on a creature, which is blink it, sack it, reanimate it, bring something back.
Right.
Because your life total goes down and down and down. And this is the opposite of it for 1 more mana.
Because it gives you the life back.
The life back instead of paying the life. So it's a really, really powerful effect on a creature that we just haven't seen at this power level yet. Like Junji's a dies trigger, which is way worse than an ETB trigger. Or I guess just an enters trigger.
That's what we've renamed it, yes. And by we, I mean them. You compare this in the outline to Agent of Treachery.
I think you look at this card and you're like, 6 mana is too much. And you look at Agent of Treachery and you're like, 7 mana is too much. And then you play with Agent of Treachery and then you play Agent of Treachery again and again and again and again. And you're like, 7 mana, I would pay anything for this creature. And you can blink it, you can sack it, bring it back, bring something else back. There's a lot of cool loops that you can do with a creature that brings another body back. It's a great thing to victimize, but back in the graveyard, get more things out. So, like, I like playing this kind of sacky, loopy creature type of pile.
Oh, yeah, I love that stuff.
So fun, and this card is a piece that we've been waiting for a long time. It's an expensive piece, but I think the miracle is easy enough that you can do some really cool stuff with it.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think it's quite powerful. I think I'm a little lower than you are just because the problem with miracle cards is sometimes you draw them.
Sometimes you draw them.
And at weird points, and you're like, oh, crap. I got to get this thing on top of my library somehow or in my bin, which is not impossible for black. But That's the downside. And 6 mana is a lot when you have reanimate and animate deads and things like that. But the recurability of this and the lifelink, I think when I first was evaluating it, thinking it was finality, it was way worse. But the lifelink is a huge deal. I think so, because so much of what Black wants to do does involve using your life as a resource. And you do get, if you play Black decks, you get cramped on life, where you're like, I can't even cast my Night's Whisper sometimes.
Yeah.
Because when I'm building decks, I think of life as like, I'll have it. Don't worry about it. And then when I'm playing, I'm like,
oh gosh.
Yeah. Do I want to spend 2 life? I'll be down to 8, and then I might die to that thing over there. Crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the lifelink is kind of a big deal. So yeah, I like this. I think it's very powerful, and I think it will see a lot of play. I just think you do want those other pieces to try and mitigate the scenario of like, I draw it and now it's 6 mana in my hand, and I don't want to be in that situation where I'm paying the 6 for it.
Yeah. That's fair. 6 is a lot, and it's going to get you in some weird situations. But in graveyard decks, it
is going to loop around and do stuff where you're like, I do this, and then I sack it, and then I do that again, and I bring it back, and then I do this, and then you're like, oh my god!
You're like, this miracle has happened 4 times.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a miracle anymore. This next card's cool, and I just wanted to mention it. We don't have to spend a ton of time here.
It's a cool design thing.
I
don't know if I would have noticed if you didn't point it out.
It's Monstrous Emergence.
Yeah.
It's 1 and a green for a sorcery. It says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, choose a creature you control or reveal a creature card from your hand. Monstrous Emergence deals damage equal to the power of the creature you chose or the card you revealed to target creature. So this is a bite spell that doesn't target your stuff.
Yeah, it's choose, right?
And doesn't even require you to have a creature on the battlefield.
Yeah, it can be from hand. Really weird. It gets around the problem with fights and bites, which has always been, if you do this and target your own thing and their thing, and then they remove your thing, your thing dies, plus there's nothing there, your bite still. So you get 2 for 1 in those instances. And tends to happen frequently enough because people are holding their removal open these days that you can't run fight and bite spells. You just really can't do it. They're just too narrow. They blow you out too often.
Right.
This is like, nope, you can't get screwed in that way.
Right.
The damage is going to happen, which changes the calculus a little.
There's a couple of big downsides to this deck. To this card. The sorcery speed is a huge thing.
Yep.
It is 2 mana. There are bites and fights that are at 1 mana that we play that are just like Bushwhack is, I think, one of the most played fight spells, and it's because it's also a land, or the Colony ambushes, that kind of thing. Those are also lands.
Yeah, I think most people think those as lands first. And
right. And fight spell
in desperate situations,
So I wasn't sure about this card.
Yeah.
I texted Brian Kibler.
Yeah.
And I was like, Brian, are you playing this? Because we've talked about creature removal in green decks specifically. If you haven't watched the How to Play Green episode, it's really awesome. Brian puts on a clinic for how to build green and red stompy creature-focused decks. So I was like,
Turns out Brian Kibler knows a little bit about how to play Magic.
He's pretty good. He's pretty good at it.
Hall of Famer Brian Kibler.
And I was like,
knows some stuff.
You should watch it.
What'd he say?
He said that he hadn't thought about it. But he said that it's nice because the downside is mitigated.
Yeah.
He does play fight and bite spells in his green decks.
Interesting.
Because it's more efficient, and sometimes you just need to be able to kill a creature. He does not play Beast Within. So, like, this kind of... He's like, I will look at it. Because it can kill stuff early, which is always Green's thing, is like bite spells aren't good until you're already set up.
Because you have to have something bigger than their thing to begin with.
So what I like about this is it can kind of do a tempo bump. If you're doing your ramp spells, you can cast a Rampant Growth, and you can cast this, kill off like a Professional Facebreaker or Douthie Voidwalker, just some little pesky, like a Ledger Shredder thing that has to get off the board, but you don't want to spend a ton of resources, and you can't get your creature in play and kill this really efficient flyer. So it just is a good part of the curve before you're starting to like actually get your engines moving. So I think it's worth looking at. I'm curious to have it tested. I've got a green deck I'm going to try it in because this is the closest thing to like a standalone bite spell that I would look at. I also play the one that's green bite Cascade, which is really good. But.
Yeah, I've been blown out by bite spells too much. I'll run the ones that are other cards too, just because, but I generally don't run them. I don't want to run a sorcery speed conditional removal spell because the conditions are easy to meet, but they're not givens. You have to have a creature in play or in your hand that is bigger than the thing you want to kill.
Yep.
So that's not always going to be the case. And in that case, this card also does nothing. And the sorcery speed, I just hate sorcery speed removal generally.
Especially for creatures.
Yeah. So I love the design. I like they took a step in this direction. And my guess is in the next couple of years, we'll probably get an instant speed version of this. It'll probably at first be costed a little too much. But what we know about Magic's design is over
we'll
time.
Get there.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at a low mana version of an instant speed version of this, within a few years. And then I think it becomes to get very interesting. Yeah.
All right. This next one is also a very neat removal spell.
Yeah. This one is called Nowhere to Run. It is 1 and a black for an enchantment. It has flash. When Nowhere to Run enters, target creature and opponent controls get -3/-3 until end of turn. And then it's an enchantment, so it sticks around and it says, creatures your opponents control can be the target of spells and abilities as though they didn't have hexproof. Ward abilities of those creatures don't trigger.
Ooh.
Turns off hexproof and ward for your opponents.
Hello. That's sweet.
It's very sweet. I like this card a lot.
This is such a neat card, and I love that there's nowhere to hide. Is that you don't have hexproof. I can see you.
Yes.
You don't have ward. You're right here. You're we got you.
Yep. Yeah, there's nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide.
It's not the best removal spell in the world. -3/-3 is can pick off some of the things we were talking about before. Douthy Voidwalkers, Professional Facebreakers.
Listen, Lightning Bolt gets better and better.
It does.
7-8 years ago, almost unplayable, not very good, and to quite good now when I run it.
Yep.
And so this is similar. It's Lightning Bolt plus 1 mana, but it has that extra ability, which I think is very relevant. And one of the things I love about it is it allows your opponents to destroy each other's stuff. You open the door to their ward creature, Jimmy can pick off your creature now. It's not just takes away so that I can do it. And so it feels like good value. I think if I'm an opponent, I'm like, man, it doesn't have ward. That enchantment could go away at any moment. Maybe I just got to take my shot and kill that thing while it's easy right now.
Yeah.
I love making my opponents think like that.
This is sweet. There's a lot to like here. Not to mention, it is a permanent that can be sacrificed and trigger your braids, your 3 mana braids. It's like everybody else sacrificed an enchantment. Oh, you didn't? Cool. It adds to devotion. It gives you enchantress triggers. You can recur it from the battlefield with Sun Titan.
If it gets milled, it's an enchantment card type in your graveyard.
There's a lot to like about this card, and there's a lot of synergies to build around it, not to mention this additional upside that just slows down a lot of protection.
Yeah, I really love this design. It works. It's like a limited design, right? Flash enchantment that gives -3/-3, and then they put that one line of text on there. It's it's a commander card all of a sudden. And I think I'm going to play this card. I think the upside is enough that it's kill your Facebreaker. Now I have this thing out that means that. And I hate freaking ward and hexproof. It's so annoying, right?
I want to mess with your stuff.
Yeah, I run a lot of interaction. Yeah, I want to be able to touch your stuff. And I also want my opponents to be able to reach out and destroy everybody else's stuff. It doesn't take hexproof from you. It doesn't take ward from you. And I like those things when I have them.
There's a big thing to mention. This is not good around Shroud.
Yeah.
So it doesn't turn off Lightning Greaves, which is sort of a big knock to it. But it turns off ward, which is everywhere. It turns off hexproof, so you're...
Shroud's pretty narrow, but it is on one of the most played cards in the whole format.
Yeah, there's a lot of a hexproof and indestructible type stuff that you can get around with this. And also, if somebody goes for a removal spell, and they're like, okay, I'll cast a Tamiyo's Safekeeping and give this hexproof or whatever. And you're like, all right, in response to that, I'm going to flash this in, kill that thing, and now that
dies. Thing still dies. Yeah, that's sweet. I love that. That's awesome. That's really great. Yeah,
Pretty sweet.
I like this card a lot.
Up next is Reluctant Role Model. This is a 1 and a white for a human survivor. He's a 2/2 with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Reluctant Role Model is tapped, put a flying, lifelink, or +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever Reluctant Role Model or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put those counters on up to 1 target creature.
It's a cool little card.
I think this is a cool little card.
Yeah.
The Ozolith is a very powerful card. We play it all the time. This isn't as good as the Ozolith.
But it does a nice impression.
But it does a decent impression. It's a good redundancy piece. I like that it makes its own counters. I like that it wears counters. I like that it's cheap.
Yeah, I think the Ozolith is great, but you wouldn't want to play a lot of them because they team up okay, but they can't wear the counters. Eventually, you're like, I need a creature to put this stuff on.
Yeah,
This one is I'll give you that. and I'll give you counters too. I'll create counters.
And this is an interesting thing because it does actually stack with the Ozolith, right?
Yeah.
If a creature dies that had counters on it, Reluctant role model and the Ozolith trigger, and they're like, oh, give me those counters. And we'll create
effectively doubles
the
them,
counters.
yeah.
So it doubles the counters, yeah. There's a lot to really like about this card. I think it's just an additional thing that you put in decks that are putting a lot of counters in it.
I really love the fact, too, that it can give itself a flying counter as the first thing it does. And now you're pretty much going to be able to attack with impunity the rest of the game, because after that point you just start putting 1/1 counters on it. It's going to be too big in the air for everybody to block for sure. And so it's just saying, like, I will get counters every turn as long as I get that first attack in.
Yeah.
Or if you have a vehicle or something, obviously that's the thing about survival that you can tap them in any way. But the easiest way is obviously you play this on turn 2, on turn 3 attack, put a flying counter on it.
Yeah. In counters decks, you probably have ways to put counters on creatures. Like, you're going to be able to make this thing big enough to be able to attack.
Yeah, and the other is if it gets a lifelink counter and you're able to put that onto something else later, that can be a really big deal too.
Yeah. Biggest downside to note for this one is it relies on dies, so it's not leaves the battlefield. If it gets swords, those counters are gone.
Oh, yeah.
And if there's a board wipe, there's nowhere to put those counters.
Yep.
It doesn't keep them safe, so the counters are gone. Ozolith can store the counters away after a board wipe. This is not the case.
Yeah, you definitely want, if you're going to run this card, you're going to want a sack effect or something, probably like a high market or something if you're not like an aristocrat's deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. These do really well with counter doublers too, because when you would put all those counters on something, you double them at that point, and it also doubles when it gets the original one, so it kind of quadruples them. It's similar to, I played a blaster deck on extra turns once, and that deck is trying to, like, it's a lot of accounting, it's a lot of math, but use modular, and like when you move modular, you double it, then you attack that thing and double it over there, and you're like, oh, it's 8x by the time it gets to the fourth creature, and that just kills you.
Yeah.
This can do sort of those similar things.
This card's sweet. I think we're going to see a lot of it. I hope it stays cheaper than the Ozolith, which makes this a little bit more accessible.
Right?
It
I
should.
feel like it should.
It should. It's not, you can't find it where there's a Saga.
Yeah,
So
it's not
maybe
colorless.
It's another cool white card. This next one is Split Up. Don't split up. One white.
I'll be right back.
One white for a sorcery. Choose one. Destroy all tapped creatures or destroy all untapped creatures. This is a hilarious design.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I'm definitely going to kill creatures, but is it the ones that went to this room or is it the ones that went to this room?
Never split up. Why are you always splitting up?
Don't split up.
It's just a key component of horror movies.
Tap all your creatures or none.
So you make a really good point here, which is that most creatures at any given time on the commander, in a commander game, are untapped.
Yeah. I went down to Murph and Manson, who edit game nights, and I was just like, hey, just confirming.
Yeah.
Most creatures are untapped most of the time, right? And he's like, let's look at the board that's on my screen. Yeah, there's 2 tapped creatures. And Manson's like, let's look at mine. No, they're all untapped.
Yeah.
So most creatures all the time, this is going to be able to blow up most of the creatures on the board for 3 mana.
That's actually good news because you can choose to tap yours. Now, you might have to put them in danger to do that, but it's a lot harder for them to choose to tap theirs when it's not their turn. And this is a sorcerer, obviously, it'd be your turn.
Yeah.
So you can kind of make it one-sided-ish. You can't guarantee it.
There's a lot of good, like, easy effects to kind of get your creatures tapped, right? There's, like, Cryptolith effects, there's Convoke, there's vehicles. Careful if you crew your vehicles, now your vehicles are untapped.
Hey, you attack with them.
And you attack with those, and hopefully they survive.
Smuggler's Copter is going to be able to attack somebody.
Yeah, so there are ways to get yours tapped without sending them to combat. But you're in a white deck, a lot of your stuff is evasion anyway. Just attack, and then blow up everything else.
Yeah, and it could be like, I'm going to attack here, and I normally wouldn't do this because 2 of them are going to die, but because I'm going to kill everything else, I'll keep the other 3. That's fine. That's good for you. Yeah, I think that's the upside, and I think the good part about it. But there's downsides, which you don't have a lot of control over what your opponent's creatures have done, and there are definitely games and moments where the thing you want to kill is tapped, and now you're in a different conundrum. You can keep yours untapped and cast it, but you might be casting to only kill like 1 or 2 things, which maybe is fine because
3 mana sorcery that kills 3 things.
Exactly. We were talking about Come Back Wrong, and that's a 3 mana spell that just kills 1 thing, maybe steals it too, but still, it's not 3 is not outside the. I think if you get up to 4, it's like I can't just be killing 1 thing for 4 mana.
Yeah.
But 3 is the most I'll ever play to do that. But if sometimes you have to.
It's fine.
It's an Atali or something. It's like
you gotta get it.
Yeah, you
gotta get it off the board.
That's not the worst.
I like a lot about this card. I like the efficiency. I really like efficient board wipes, especially in white, because you can double spell, you can blow up all of the stuff, and then you're like, all right, well, none of my creatures survived, but at least I can cast this and
I
pass.
have mana left, yeah.
So you're not spending your entire turn to do that. But if like the only thing you're looking for in a board wipe is efficiency, there's like Vanquish the Horde that just destroys all creatures. Blasphemous Act just destroys all creatures for the most part.
Yep.
And they're 1 and 2 mana, assuming there's more than 6 or 8 creatures on the board. So there's issues with the card. But the scenario that I keep thinking of, in the early game, in white decks, you're going to commit creatures to the board earlier than everybody else. You're going to play a creature on 2, you're going to play a creature on 3. Then on turn 4, you attack with both those creatures and you destroy all the setup creatures that your opponents just put down.
Brutal.
That is devastating.
Yeah, I kill all the commanders and like a couple of their utility creatures, and they're like, oh, we're 2 turns behind now.
What a horrible tempo swing for the board. And it was an easy attack. It was like, of course, I can attack. You don't have you can't block this or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it is a pretty devastating like early game play.
Mm-hmm. Which is cool. We're looking for board wipes that are can do that kind of stuff. They can keep a deck from snowballing out of control. And like sometimes you want to cast an early damnation that's just like, everybody's more set up than I am. I need to hit the panic button.
Of course, here we are, and Rachel's explaining how to use a board wipe proactively, and I'm like, holy crap, I never thought about that.
Wait, you don't cast
I
board
use
wipe
it as
when
an
you're
attacker?
Die?
Wait, I want to use... Wait, I've never thought about casting a board wipe on turn 4. What are we talking about? Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, of course, you don't always draw it at the time, and that's my worry, is like later in the game, it's quite a bit worse than you're going to be like, I just wish I had a Wrath of God. So I think it's probably deck dependent in some ways, and it's going to be obviously be better probably in your type of decks than mine, because you're going to get out to early starts and be like smash and face, and it's going to be really good behind the back of that. It's going to be devastating. Turn 5, attack, blow up everything that everybody has, play another 2-drop, and then be like, go, and they'll be like, oh crap.
Like, you lost a Beast Whisperer, you lost your commander, and you lost like 2 summoning sick mana dorks.
It's probably like they lost all their commanders plus a couple of, plus 1 or 2 other creatures out there, and losing your commander is like, yeah, my whole plan's offline for 2 turns now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
it's sick. I'm excited.
That scenario is going to be brutal. But then later in the game, it's okay though. I don't mind dead cards later as much as I don't want dead cards early. I don't want to have virtually mulliganed. But in decks where you build in enough card advantage, it doesn't matter that much if you've got a couple of cards that are like not that useful. Just you're gonna have 12 cards in your hand at some point. If 2 of them were only good early, that's fine.
Yeah. You're going to draw a rampant growth late in the game. That's how it happens.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Is this the 3rd cool white card in the row? It sure is.
A lot, yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about another white card. It is the Wandering Rescuer, 3 white, so 5 mana for a 3/4 legendary human samurai noble. Has flash and convoke. Has double strike as well, and says other tapped creatures you control have hexproof. Remember, it has flash and convoke.
Sweet.
So you can use it as a protection spell, right? They go to target one or more than one of your things, and you convoke those things to cast this, and when this hits the battlefield before their spell is resolved, those things now have hexproof. Sweet. Unless they have nowhere to run.
That's true. That's true.
Just play around, nowhere around. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, now you're going to be afraid of it.
A very coolly designed card, for sure.
I agree. There's some cool stuff going on here. Like the obvious comparison is Clever Concealment, which is convoke, protect any number of things as long as they're tapped. And this says protect, tap some of your creatures. So if you have a lot of creatures that can reduce this casting cost as much as possible, and you have like key engine creatures that you need to protect, your Jahiras or like Mondrax or your commanders.
Yeah.
This is a great way to protect those pieces. It isn't complete protection. Hexproof doesn't save you from board wipes. Hexproof doesn't...
Indestructible is a little bit better protection from board wipes, obviously. Hexproof is pinpoint, so if they go to remove a thing or 2, it doesn't save you from like mass bounce or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting thing where I think this card's okay, but it's kind of the inverse of what we talked about earlier with the bodies attached to the enduring cards, where you're like, these are all kind of better. Crypt of the Light, right? Being a creature is kind of better
'Cause it
than
taps
it
for mana,
not.
yeah.
But this could be on the other end of the spectrum where like what you're using it to do is save your creatures. So the fact that it's a creature is not as useful. And also it's a double strike card at its heart, which tells me it's in a deck that wants to beat down. Well, in your beatdown decks, your creatures don't want to be sitting there untapped. So what are the odds that like you have the mana, this available at a time when all of your stuff is untapped, that you're going to actually be able to use it to save anything?
Well, and the other downside of it being a creature is they can remove it.
Yeah.
This is a static effect. So if somebody goes to remove your creature and then you flash this in, you're like, all my stuff has hexproof. Another player or that same player could get involved and bounce your Wandering Rescuer and be like, nah, it doesn't have hexproof anymore. And then their spell resolves and your protection's done nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas like a Clever Concealment, if it resolves, it's done.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't love it as a protection spell, and as a creature, it's like it's fine, but it's nothing special. So, I probably don't think this would like supplant any of the current protection spells for me.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to replace Clever Concealment or anything like that. I think you have to think about it as like a long-term hexproof for your attackers. Is the kind of deck that would want this effect, right? Is like, I don't want anybody messing with my combat when I'm in combat.
Yeah, it's interesting. It does put your opponents in an interesting place when you do that, which is they can't wait to see who you've declared as attackers to do stuff. So you're going to get a lot of like, wait, hold on, before you go to combat, who are you going to attack?
Yeah. It also doesn't work with vigilance, which is sort of a big white keyword. So,
yeah, I don't love this one.
It's a little weird. It's not my favorite. It's definitely too expensive right now.
All right, we're almost there. Couple left. The next one is Unholy Annex. Oh, sorry, it's a room card. It's Unholy Annex on the left side and Ritual Chamber on the right. Unholy Annex is 2 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. If you control a demon, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Otherwise, you lose 2 life. And then the other side is Ritual Chamber, 3 black for an enchantment that says, when you unlock this door, create a 6/6 black demon creature token with flying.
Okay, let's ignore this in demon or changeling decks or anything that reliably.
It's really good if you've got
really
a lot of those. Yeah.
But if
draw
you don't,
a card and drain your opponents for 2
on your end step immediately
every turn.
Also, it makes a demon. Yeah, that seems really good in those decks.
But if you don't, then it's kind of a bad Phyrexian Arena.
Yeah, it's a Phyrexian Arena that triggers on your end step.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the Phyrexian Arena problem where you have to wait until this, but your mana's already tapped and your turn is passed. So like the extra card is...
You will get it, whereas it won't get removed before you do, but it's 2 life instead of 1. So I think that is... I would count that as worse. But it's not like 100 worse on every angle, I guess.
I would also consider it has the room thing where it draws the other card.
Sure.
It also has a 5 mana 6/6 demon. Does this have trample? No. It has flying. It's fine.
Yeah.
So it has this sort of threat stapled to it as well.
Yeah.
Is that
I would
good?
say that a 5 mana 6/6 flyer is probably like not a card you would put in your deck.
It's gravy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
the
fine.
gravy demon.
It's fine as a... Yeah, it's fine as a thing you could get. And the one good thing is that you can get that as the demon that's going to make you stop taking 2.
Yep.
And make you start gaining 2. So, but in a commander game, spending 5 mana for a vanilla 6/6 flyer is not... If you're doing that, I would assume you're losing that game if that's the best thing you've got to do.
I would agree. Yeah, this is... if you're playing Phyrexian Arena, maybe you look at it. If you're in a demon deck, maybe you look at it. I haven't played Phyrexian Arena in a little bit. If you've got a lot of changelings, then it gets good. This is a faster clock than Phyrexian Arena, so if you're in a more aggressive deck, maybe. But
sorry, I stepped on what you said there, but I'm the same. I do not play Phyrexian Arena really at all anymore. I might have, like I said, I have a lot of decks, so there might be a few that it's still lingering around. But in general, if I'm actively messing with the deck and I find Phyrexian Arena in there, I'm taking it out and I'm putting it in something better because there's just better stuff now.
Draw too.
Yeah, Night's Whisper for sure, but yeah. So I don't love this card, but with demons or enough changelings, that is a big enough difference that it does become good.
It's a combo with black market connections.
What?
It makes shapeshifters, Josh.
Yeah.
It makes shapeshifters.
Yeah. 5 life later.
That's your favorite. You just play.
I already have drawing cards. I don't need
pay all the life, and you also cast this. Now you're getting the life back from black market.
That's a good point. It's free shapeshifters every turn.
All right. Up next is Waltz of Rage. 3 red for his sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control dies, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. So this is a Chandra's Ignition that doesn't go face.
Yeah.
And also draws you cards.
Yeah, which is a big difference because Chandra's Ignition as a win con is legit.
Yep.
The drawing cards thing is cool, but you have to have creatures that are then dying. So you're...
This is a weird one.
Yeah.
It is a weird one. It was originally not on my list, but like there are some decks where it just feels completely busted.
Yeah, you have Prosper down, and when I looked at that, I was like, oh man.
Absurd.
That's nuts.
It's absurd in Prosper.
Prosper has Death Touch.
Prosper has Death Touch, so everything dies except Prosper. Now you have like
all these impulse drops
like
that
4 or
also
5
yeah.
that also trigger Prosper. Like you don't have a ton of creatures in Prosper, but like if you kill like 2 or 3 things, you impulse draw 3 cards and you kill everything else on the board.
Yeah.
If your commander has lifelink, this becomes really absurd. You deal all of that damage, you gain all of that life.
Yep.
If you're making incidental tokens in like a Stormy style Spellslinger list, you kill all of those tokens, you impulse draw a ton of stuff. So like I was thinking of Judith Carnage Connoisseur.
Oh yeah.
Is the one that makes those, they're like imps? What are they?
They are
imps.
Yep.
You make the imp when they die.
When they die, they deal 2.
And that's an instant and sorcery Spellslinger type of list that needs a ton of card acceleration and doesn't really care about those imps being on the battlefield.
Yeah, and you draw more cards basically, impulse draw for all the stuff that dies and deal the damage. Whew.
So there's like some lists where this suddenly looks absurd.
Yeah, it looks very good there, but I think your average deck doesn't want it, right?
No. Definitely not. But I wanted to mention it because I definitely looked at it and was like, well, this is bad. And then I started to look at like Othari. Othari is like a 3/3 with lifelink that makes 2/2 rebels. And you're like, okay, now I've gained 20 life and I've impulse drawn 4 cards and I still have Othari on the board and all my experience counters. I'm going to get all of those things back right away. That feels bananas. So there's definitely commanders where you need to look at this card twice. But most commanders are going to be like, Waltz of Rage? Nah.
There's one other scenario where I think you could consider it, and that's a deck that has mostly big stuff. Because your ability to say, like, I'm going to deal 4 to everything, won't kill any of my stuff, one-sided.
Yeah. Like,
if you can get in the 3-4 range, most decks, that will kill a lot of their stuff. And if most of your stuff is larger than that, then you can make this kind of pseudo one-sided board wipe. And I think then I'd consider running it there. Chandra's Ignition is also good in that spot, even though it's even better when you can like give it infect or make something a 20/20 or whatever. But yeah.
It has the downside of Chandra's Ignition as well, which is it can be fizzled if they remove your targeted creature.
Yeah, or sometimes you just look at it and you're like, well, it'll kill my stuff, won't even kill all of theirs. It does nothing. Like Chandra's Ignition is sweet, but definitely
Doesn't do what
melted in my hands many times.
For sure. So look at it. It's cool. Not great, but cool. One more card to go. And it's a quick one.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple one. So this is Withering Torment. It's 2 in a black for an instant. It says destroy target creature or enchantment.
Oh.
You lose 2 life.
Only 2?
Pretty good.
At instant speed?
Yeah.
So the only black enchantment removal we typically play is Feed the Swarm.
Yeah.
It's 2 mana for a sorcery, and you lose life equal to the thing that you've killed.
It's one of the only black cards that even does it.
Right.
So, and it's a sorcery. This is an instant and 1 more mana.
Right.
But it caps the life loss at 2. You can't lose more.
Okay. I can get rid of it.
Yeah.
My big question is 3 mana too much? Does this make the cut in the decks that, like, assuming you're not in white or in green, if you're in Rakdos or if you're in Dimir, maybe you look at this because enchantments are a tricky permanent for you to be able to deal with.
Yep.
Assuming that, do you play this in your Rakdos decks and your Dimir decks?
I think about it. I think Chaos Warp I probably play above it in Rakdos, and do I want 2 things that deal? I think the first question really
is it better than Feed the Swarm?
Does it replace Feed the Swarm? And I think the answer is no for me.
I think it makes it a better creature removal spell because the instant speed is better for creature removals, and it makes it better for interrupting like combo type stuff. Feed the Swarm is a shame because like they can play certain stuff and then go off right then, and you're like, if I untapped, wowee, would you not do that again?
Right.
So the instant speed is a huge boon here. But
it's also, you can't cast an instant speed if you don't have 3 mana.
If you don't have 3 mana.
Yeah.
So it is more expensive.
Between those 2 cards,
which one I
do you run Feed the Swarm right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Will you replace Withering Torment and run that instead of Feed the Swarm, do you think?
I don't think I will.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I tend to like more efficient removal, and if my color can't do it, then it can't really do it. And I'd rather not play a bad card to try and patch a hole. Like, I could just play something black is good at that's a 3 mana creature that does way more for me than like a overcosted enchantment removal spell.
Yeah, I like what you said there too. The creature part, the instant's more important, but I'm likely to have a lot more ways in my deck to deal with creatures, and this is probably mostly there to deal with enchantments, and that because the instant speed part is sort of less important for an enchantment, to me that makes the mana cost more important than 2 versus 3. So then the question becomes, if you want more than one of that effect, and I think, like I said, I think Chaos Warp is probably above it and below Feed the Swarm. So
if you're in blue-black, you play counterspells over it.
Yep.
If you're in red-black, then you play Chaos Warp above it, you play Feed the Swarm above it, and you're in red-black, you just kill them.
I don't have enchantment removal, but I got player
I can
removal.
kill you, so I'm
So you don't think you run it in Rakdos?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that's the only place I would really think about it. I think Dimir has bounce as well as a backup.
Too,
bounce and counterspell is like, hey, not the best plan, but it's a plan, and it's already there. So I think this card reads good, but the difference between 3 and 2 is a lot.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. That's what we're going to talk about for Duskmourn. But before we go, of course, we got to talk about our favorite cards and the most powerful
what
cards
we think
in the
is the most powerful.
99. Yeah, big guess. I mean,
This one was hard, actually.
It was really hard. Let's talk about our favorites first. We've alluded to your favorite already.
Nowhere to Run.
Yeah, it's sweet.
I like that card a lot.
It's really
Of course, I know. I chose the 2-drop. But yeah, I love things that are efficient and cost me very little to get like a tricky kind of effect. Like that is just right up my alley.
You can blink it?
Yeah, it's just
cool.
I love the political ramifications of it. I think we just I don't know if this episode's come out yet, but we've talked about how like a lot of what I like in Commander is kind of feeling safe, and that card will make me feel very safe because not only like I can kill something, and it also opens the door to being able to kill anything. They can't do all this crappy hexproof stuff. So
stop.
Yes,
you have nowhere to run.
All right, what's your favorite card?
I really like Split Up. The more I think about casting it, the more like the upside is it's a 3-mana one-sided Wrath in an aggro deck, and you're like, what? That's so cracked. That's really cool.
That early Split Up is going to end my life.
Woo!
Yeah, it's going to be brutal.
Yeah.
You finally get your commander out, and you're like starting to think about stabilizing, and you're like, nope,
dead. Hit you again. You're like, what? Yeah, I think this card's really sick.
All right, I had really trouble figuring out what I thought was the most powerful card for the 99 from this set.
Yeah.
It might be like the White Enduring card, which we didn't talk about a lot, and I had that in consideration, but we didn't talk about it that much.
Yeah, the Lamb, that's fine. I mean, it's a powerful
good.
card.
The Welcoming Vampire with Upside.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like the most.
I know.
I mean,
there wasn't anything that I thought was overtly like
there's like
broken.
The Room that also casts a Yawgmoth's Will is like, that's a very powerful card.
Yeah, it might be one of those too.
Yeah.
Like those are all pretty good. The green one's good. The Raven Up,
We didn't talk a lot about them because we're just like,
they're good, obviously.
You're going to play that.
Yeah.
So like all of those are probably in contention. There's no card that you're pointing at that you're just like, that one is messed up. I tend to, for most powerful card, I think of like what card can make a huge impact on a game.
Yeah.
Or like what's the one that you can do stuff that feels the most broken with. And for me, that's Metamorphosis Fanatic. That's the Miracle Reanimate stuff.
Yep.
Just because I think you can create, like I can see that deck very clearly and I can see the situation where it just feels unbeatable. But that's a very narrow deck. That's not going to go in a card. It's not going to go in a ton of decks. So,
yeah, it's always the question about powerful is how you define the word powerful, right? Like, is it how good is it at its best, or is it how good its average is? We talk about this every time. I tend to go skew towards average.
Yeah.
I think you tend to skew towards
Ceiling,
best.
yeah.
Neither's wrong. Anyway, mine is Dollmaker's Shop and Porcelain Gallery, which is the token maker on one side and then the token pump effect on the other.
Yeah, I think those rooms are a good candidate for just really powerful raw stuff.
Yeah, and this one, that strategy is very common, right? There's a lot of token decks. Most of them include white, and I think most of them are going to want to play that card, and that card will end a lot of games with its right side and will also set up the end of a lot of games with its left side. So
yeah. Some really powerful stuff going on in this set, but mostly very flexible stuff.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of choices, which is fun. And I like this sort of trend in design, is just giving you a card that gives you options. There's a lot very playable, makes you feel very smart, which is what we all want out of Magic.
yeah, unfortunately, a lot of time it makes me feel dumb, though.
That too.
Yeah.
To the listener.
I guess you can't have one without the other.
What card makes you feel dumb? What do you think about this set? Are you excited about it? Is this more your thing over Bloomborough? Let us know. Did we miss any weird room rules situations?
Were we wrong about any of them? I think we could have been. Who knows? I feel like they changed them like 3 times too.
And what cards are you most excited about? Let us know in the comments. We're always reading those, making sure we stay plugged into what you guys think.
And of course, if you want to get your hands on any of these Duskmourn cards, go on over to cardkingdom.com/command. They have all the Duskmourn stuff. If you want to get a booster box, a collector's booster, you want to get the pre-cons, anything at all. Of course, if you're like me and you still need to catch up a little bit from the summer, I don't have any Assassin's Creed cards yet. And then
MH3 MDFCs to pick up.
Oh yeah, I only have a couple of those MDFCs. I need a lot of those. Sweet. Yeah, cardkingdom.com/command. We love them because they have a huge inventory, so they're going to have the cards you need. They have really quick shipping, so they're going to get that stuff to your doorstep all in one package. You're not waiting on a bunch of different envelopes, and they have an entire customer service department, and I think that's a really big thing as well. So if mistakes happen, that is just a thing that happens, and anywhere you order from, sometimes mistakes are going to happen. The great thing about Card Kingdom is they have a whole team that is there to make sure that they can sort of make you right and fix whatever the problem was. And their huge inventory plays into this, because I've definitely ordered from other places where, like, hey, I don't get the card I want. I contact them, and they don't have the one that I'm looking for, and it was an error. And it's like, okay, I either got to send the thing back or whatever, but they can't replace it. They refund you or whatever. And now you have to like order from somewhere else, and you're out days and days by the time this has happened. And Card Kingdom doesn't make it like that at all. You contact them, they fix it right away. So that is something that you want in all businesses that you deal with. Yeah. cardkingdom.com/command.
Once those cards are in your hand, you're going to need to protect them, keep them safe, looking cool. Go to ultrapro.com/command to pick up the best accessories in Magic, in gaming. If you're really into Duskmourn, they've got some cool art on playmats, on deck boxes, binders, sleeves. Check out the new Apex sleeves. Yeah. They've been printing art from each set onto Apex sleeves. They're really, really nice, long-lasting sleeves that they've been working on for a long time. So if you're into Duskmourn, definitely take a look at those. Go look at the binders and sign up for their newsletter if you haven't yet. They get these flash sales that happen. It feels like every other weekend. Is all the time.
Tons of good deals.
Where you're just like, if you need to get 6 deck boxes or you need to go holiday shopping, gosh, that's coming up so much sooner
than I thought. Or something.
You can pick them up in one place and get a great deal on them. But sign up for that newsletter. They'll let you know when those flash sales are happening and when they get like drops and stuff for secret layers. It's a ton of fun. ultrapro.com/command to support the show.
All right, and before we go, I just want to shout out that we are going to be at MagicCon Las Vegas at the end of October 25th through 27th. We are doing Game Nights Live once again. We have some cool special guests. We have Mark Rosewater and Becca Scott joining us for a very spooky, we're calling it the Tournament of Terror. It's very scary. It gets right near Halloween. You get it. Okay. But if you're going to be in Vegas, let us know. Hopefully we find you, see you there. Maybe we get a game in or at least take a picture or something like that. I believe there are still some badges available as well, so we'll put that link in the show notes.
All right. Before we go, we say thank you to our amazing team here at the Command Zone. Thank you to Eric Lem, Rachel Kendra, Grav Galati, Jamie Block, Jordan Pridgeon, Jake Boss, Josh Murphy, Manson Lung, Karina Cruz, Sebastian Salazar, Evan Limburger, Sam Waldo, and yours truly, Jimmy Wong.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Peace.
For your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @JoshLeeQuai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.